Today's podcast is brought to you by the Hounds of Baskerville, the traditional barbershop and shaving parlour. Looking a bit scruffy? Got a big date? Maybe you got an important meeting? Go online and book at hounds.sg. Tales from growing up all over India, and how his father had a death threat made against him, and how his mum crossed enemy lines. This is There's Something About Tarun Martha. Yeah, I'm still shocked that, India has a border with Myanmar or Burma. Yeah. I really didn't know that. I'm so ignorant.
Growing up, they had these amazing cigarette lighters, which were very popular with troops, right?
Right.
So you'd have this little silver case. You open that up, they put your cigarettes in.
Yes.
And it was also a light. It was the most popular thing going, and it would come in from the Burmese border.
Oh, it was something that they would
there was
make.
There was a lot of smuggling that occurred. Let me call it trade, right? It was just traders trading across the border. I don't think it was called smuggling those days. There was no,
right. Because I'm looking at it now, there's no river that marks a border, right?
There is just, I think there is a river that you cross to get to Burma from India. There's one point where there's actually a river.
Right.
But I don't think there's a river that goes all the way along the border.
So they're just kind of like the top of that mountain to the top of that mountain, through the jungle. Yeah. Right.
And I don't think you have a fence or, borders are porous, right? You don't have a line. You
Up there.
You don't know where you're, when you're going into somebody else's.
Yeah, because I was in the very, very north of Thailand, so I was on a road, and I sort of got up to a bit, and there was one of those things across the front, and I was I'm just gonna go through, and he's like,
"No, you can't.
This is Burma."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, well, I don't have my passport with me, so I'll sort of go back." And I was just on a moped getting lost,
right.
Yeah. But yeah, up there it's crazy, and then as well, the top of Vietnam where all the tribes are, right? All the hill tribes. There's sort of that whole region bordering China, and then sort of down around through Myanmar, where it's there's so many different ethnicities that before the borders were there, they were just all
there was intermingling, this meshed.
Yeah.
And that's how the food cultures actually go, right? That's why there's so much of food culture that's common even in this region, right? So it's this crossover, and it's with people. That's how food travels in.
Yeah. Oh, it was just so amazing back then. So then India's border. Okay, I'll test you on your geography. What are the countries that border India?
Well, Pakistan.
Yes.
Nepal.
Yes.
Bhutan.
Yes.
Bangladesh.
Yes.
Don't think we share a border with Afghanistan, no. So it's and then I think we don't share a border, but it's about 30 kilometers down south is Sri Lanka.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a bit of water between us and them, but
I
think those are the countries we.
I think you passed the geography test. You said Bangladesh.
Yes. Said Burma.
Well, it's a really tight little gap between Bangladesh and Nepal, huh?
There is, yes.
This tiny little channel of land. Wow. Yeah, so when I went to India, I flew into Trivandrum.
That's a beautiful town again, yeah.
But that's the short name.
Yeah, it's now Thiruvananthapuram, I think. That's the long name.
We have to look it up, because I remember it was the... I might have it wrong. It was the longest name of any...
Indian city?
Airport in the world, I thought.
Okay, let's look at that.
There
I was right. Yeah, Thiruvananthapuram.
Thiruvananthapuram.
No, you just break it up this way. You make that Thiru.
Yeah,
Thiruvananthapuram.
So that ends silent?
Yeah, yes, that would be, yeah.
Thiruvananthapuram.
That's correct.
Okay. But it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 letters. No wonder Trivandrum's it just rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. Yeah, so that was in the most southern part of India, right?
Have you been to? Yeah.
Yeah, around Kerala, a little bit of Tamil Nadu.
But that's really beautiful, right? So they call Kerala God's own country, right? Because it's got the paddy, it's got the coconuts, it's got the backwaters.
Yeah, the backwaters was nice.
And then you can go from there into the hills, so you can go into mountainous territory from there as well.
Yeah, so
that borders Tamil Nadu and
Yeah. Because when I must have been up there, because when we walked into Tamanadu, like we were right up on the top of the hills and sort of like hiking, and it was in an area where I can't remember the name of the national park. There was there was still tiger in the area, sort of thing. So parts of it real remote, but often hard.
I think the Madhumalai forest, that's a reserve area where there's a lot of wildlife still. Yeah, that kind of borders that zone.
We'd go hiking at night with guides, and they had guns, just in case, I guess.
No, it is. I mean, and that there's still a lot of conservation effort in that area, and I think in southern India there's a lot of conservation. There's a lot of focus on greenery, on forest, in respect for the environment, which really ingrained into the culture still.
Oh, it's not like it's not like a new thing sort of pushed on people?
No. If you look at since you've been to Kerala, right? If you see coconut as an important part of diet, coconut husk is used extensively. You use coconut husk for a variety of products, from mattresses to scrubs.
Right.
You activate it
fuel,
charcoal, fuel, right? The coconut itself, the husk is used for fuel. The shell is used again for anything hard. You can create cutting edges with it.
Right.
And the coconut itself has the milk, it has the flesh. So it's really, and there's a lot of focus in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu. I think these two states particularly about being one in nature. It's really still there.
So they're one of the most like eco-friendly areas of India?
Wherever you have lesser development, right? So if you go away from the larger cities, there's a frugal nature in India which I guess is making a way, right? So if you think of a lot of the way, there's this thing called a matka, right? It's a carrier for water, right? It's a little cylindrical little cup. Think of it as a mug. Mm-hmm. For years, everyone would have their own matka, and it was multi-purpose. You could drink your tea with it, your water with it. There was no concept of, buy once and throw away, right?
Right.
You reuse this, right? So I think if you go back into the smaller towns, right, there's a sense of frugality that's come as necessity. So you tend to recycle things. It's a way of life, and I think it's coming back. We're talking about sustainable living, but in a lot of these places there was no other option than to do things in a more sustainable way.
Right. Yeah. So, because you didn't have the luxury of single use.
You didn't have the luxury of single use. You didn't have the means for single use. So you
Yeah. Because I'm sidetracking a bit, but like the man he was a man that invented the plastic bag, like the one that you go get your shopping with. Yeah. He never invented it as single use.
No, it was meant for.
It was meant for put it back in your pocket and continually use it.
Right, yeah.
It just kind of people got lazy, I guess.
Yeah. And it is that it's availability and. But there are parts, for example, in my hometown in Pune, you can't get a plastic bag.
Okay.
They've just banned the use of plastic, right? So you have to go, you either carry your own bags or you buy a jute bag or a cloth bag, but they've just completely banned the use of plastic bag. This is not recent. They've done this for the last 10 years or so. So in a way, what's happened is that as a result, you don't consume plastic bags. There's a lesser problem of all the disposal, because the only way you can get rid of plastic is to incinerate it, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't incinerate it, it just goes into the subsoil. It goes into the rivers.
It just takes so long to break down.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's quite like banning plastic bags sort of 10 years ago. That's in line with what people would consider more developed countries. Do you know what I mean? Like, because generally, and maybe it's my stupidity, it's kind of like that eco-friendly movement and understanding seems to come from more developed nations, sort of thing. But that's in line on a time scale with.
It is very much in line. So look, we were chatting earlier. India is a really diverse country, right? So you have these areas where I think the need to be more ecologically aware, the need for sustainability is there. For example, Bombay has, for everything Bombay is known, it has also the reputation that 76% of all waste gets recycled. And
really?
That's a BBC documentary. Even I didn't know that. I watched it sitting in Singapore saying, I didn't know that, right? Because now again, there's a whole economy around that, right? Because there's poverty, so you have rag pickers. and they will pick up stuff, they will sort it. It the plastic gets
The way you see the kids like on the piles of rubbish.
That's right,
and it,
yeah. And but I didn't know that. But Bombay is, I think, one of the cities which has the highest percentage of recycling occurring. Now, it's not a pleasant sight to see young kids picking up, but it's their livelihood, right? So it's a necessity.
Yeah.
But it's helping. And I was quite stunned when I
it's
saw
kind
this.
of like a byproduct of poverty.
It is a byproduct
to a certain
poverty,
extent.
to some extent. And what you want to do is you don't want to see that, right? So if you prevent the problem upstream, then you shouldn't have this. So there's a whole upliftment of poverty that's also happening in India at this point.
There's a focus to bring to lessen the gap.
Yeah, so there's this fascinating book called Factfulness, and not just in India, in a lot of countries, right? There's been this complete upliftment of poverty by millions and millions of people, right? So for example, growing up, I think they would say like the Indian middle class was about 2.5 to 3 million people.
Right.
And now I think it's probably 300 and 350 million people. Now, but equally what's important is, people that we would call the bottom of the pyramid, right? Has actually been a massive lift up. Both China and India share this kind of a metric that the upliftment of poverty levels have been massive in both these countries.
When you say upliftment, you mean like their quality of life has come up, or that the people in the bottom part of the pyramid have moved up?
They moved
and
up.
made the middle of the pyramid wider.
The middle of the pyramid's wider, and there's this movement upwards as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I think in Factfulness, this book, which I think is absolutely worth a read for anyone, it says your life changes from $1 a day to $2 a day to $3 a day to $4 a day. At $4 a day, you're part of the developing world.
See.
Because at $1 a day, you're lucky to, what it means is you've got secured one meal, and your second meal is kind of chancy.
Right.
By the time you get to $2, you're at least getting 3 meals a day, and you've got a place to stay, which is okay. Between $3 to $4 a day, right? It now means that you have mobility. You probably have a small fridge, so you can store food. And the minute you start doing things, your upward mobility starts, right? So there's this fascinating way of looking at the world at $1, $2, $3, and $4.
Which is crazy. Like,
it's crazy
to think like that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
at times thinking, it's going to be a tough month this month, right, sort of thing. Like, and
yep, but there is that. So I think when you look at all of this, you see this upliftment, and it's not just, I think, India, it's China, it's a lot of countries, right? Which is why I think a focus on development is probably the only way to help the world, right? Because you've got to take people away from hunger and disease and sanitation. You have to move them. Very simply, it's Maslow's hierarchy, right? You get the basic maintenance needs done, then society can progress.
Do you think like maybe COVID helped bring a focus on that in India? Like, I remember when it was starting to occur, like people like I spoke to one guy actually, and he was from India, and he said like he goes, I'm so worried. He goes like, in India we will lose so many people. He said like we are not prepared for this, especially in like the big in the slums. Yeah.
Look, I think COVID it's been an eye opener, right? And I think in India it just caught everybody by surprise, right? I think the intensity, the velocity at which COVID came in. I have a friend of mine, so this is not, it's anecdotal, but it's a close friend who's a doctor. A classmate of mine who became a doctor and still is in my hometown. She and a couple of doctors actually had to build up a COVID hospital, so there was a new infrastructure hospital that was being built up. But they had to completely change the plans and make it a COVID-ready hospital, which they did over months. And it's those types of initiatives that, you had to do in every city to control the spread of this virus, right? So I think, we probably had our lowest moment in time during COVID, and then I think the bad news is what spreads the fastest, right? So the good stories they're not newsworthy. So we also do a bad job beyond the problem of of the stories around it, right? So, but look, we were all terrified. We were sitting in Singapore. I have parents in India, so really, we were. I think all of us were extremely worried.
And so, but in the end, it wasn't so bad as people thought it would be in India, right? Like they were using other medications and other strategies.
They use a lot of strategies. I think at the initial stage, what happened was no one knew how to treat
no one in the world knew how to treat it, right?
But I think doctors realized, for example, the use of oxygen, right, which was what everybody heard, that you have to oxygenate people, was probably incorrect, because you actually, and I don't know the medicine behind that, but that actually led to more deaths.
Yeah, so, I heard, like in America, once they put them on the ventilator,
that was
you were pretty much going to die.
Yeah, that's right. So then I think the doctors in India realized that we have to figure out what was needed. So I think they kind of used a combination of existing antibiotics. It was get them into hospital early. So, and if somebody was diagnosed for COVID, you'd move them into hospitals right away, which is why you saw that increase and peaking of hospital bed capacity. So there were a couple of things that made press, which was oxygen shortage. But I think the real constraint was having enough of beds and enough of staff. And I think that was the one takeaway from dealing with this pandemic, is that you have to look at your healthcare capacity. And the minute you're hitting a 70% of capacity utilization, you've got to take other measures. And I think
you're not ready for an influx
you're not ready for
something that's unknown, like a natural disaster, or which COVID is to a certain extent, I guess. Yeah.
So I think that one got, but the focus. I mean, we came there from that, poverty alleviation, but I think that's years of development, right? Now, argue, is it fast enough? Is it? But at least it's established that from a data point of view, that's happened. But we still have a long way to go, right? We talk about a digital divide, which is percentage of younger people to an older population, and India has a digital divide in its favor. But it also means that we have to make the economy grow faster. You've got to create more jobs. You've got to create more infrastructure.
So meaning it's a young population?
It's a young population.
Oh, is it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right,
so
right.
It has that as it's in its favor. But to make it work in your favor, you've got to do all the other things of developing a country. And I think that's...
That's that infrastructure.
That's the infrastructure.
With everything from roads to Wi-Fi sort of thing.
That's right. And I think infrastructure...
Clean water.
Infrastructure, they say, has a really positive impact, because I think for every... I don't have the exact data, but for every kilometer of highways you build, there's a trickle down into the GDP, right? Because you're building...
Really?
So, there is that. That's established.
Okay, so that exists as data.
That exists as data points, yeah. So that's one big thing, and that helps the capital industry. But then job creation, entrepreneurship helps, the employment, the employability of your people. And I think globally, all over the world, the SMB sector is the largest employer of people. We all tend to think it's the large multinationals. Yes, they are. But the large multinationals have a huge ecosystem of suppliers and services that they consume.
Right.
And that is the larger part of the economy, right?
But then with those roads, especially as they go into sort of more remote places, they bring all sorts of other terrible things with them, right? like especially when they go into, like, you hear of like Africa and like, they're building a new road, and then in comes like a whole lot of disease with that. Or
that is correct.
Like in the Amazon as well, right?
Yes, yeah. There's still tribes that have no or very limited human contact, but they've not got vaccinated. So you could actually wipe out a tribe just because of, they're now exposed to things that they were never exposed to.
One sneeze. So yeah, like what they could do is like have a program, right? So because I'm sure like in governments build these roads, right? But areas where they're not, what if like like you privatized it and the community got together and they build a road, and that money that you're talking about that comes down from each kilometer of road, they share part of that.
Look, conceptually, it's a brilliant idea.
It would never happen.
No, it's I think getting people together in a way to make it happen, right? I think that's the challenge.
Everyone would be like, one village would be like, no, we finish here.
That is correct.
And we're going in that direction, and another one would be, no, that doesn't work for us. We want to go this way.
So I think the governance of that would be the challenge. And more than that, it's the acquisition of land, right? That's the sensitive topic. Because look, we're an agricultural society, right? 70% of our GDP previously was agriculture, and must be still a very large percentage.
Right.
So then land is really an area where a lot of battles were fought. So you probably will have, conflict as well, because land rights are always tricky, right? And in every part of the world, it's not just
Yeah, it's definitely true about that. There's nowhere in India where there's like people are undiscovered tribally, right?
So Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is
that's part of India,
This
right?
is part of India, yeah. So Andaman and Nicobar, they're still, I think, the islands that you cannot visit, or if you are, you stay a good.
Yeah, there was the missionary that went there and was
That's
like,
right.
praise Jesus.
Praise
and
Jesus,
they were like,
he didn't have a very good
ending. They stabbed him with an arrow or something.
That wasn't a very
right?
good ending for him. Yeah, you don't want to do things like that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. But Andaman and Nicobar, but it's the reality of what happened, right? But
yeah, I forgot that's part of India.
it is. But again, I think somebody within our government is very sensible. They've actually kept those islands, and they're not allowing development to go in.
They're time capsules, right?
Yeah, they're literally time capsules. But it's the last of our indigenous tribes, right?
So that's the only
I think
place?
That is, I think Nagaland and Arunachal, I wouldn't say that they are untouched by civilization as we know it, but I think there are still enough of tribes and villages which remain relatively isolated and not really mainstream integrated, if I would use that as a word.
But they're not living primitively, right? Like they would have they know what a television is.
They definitely would know what a television is. They probably have access to a community television as opposed to a TV in their home. But I think it's a matter of time. It's that pace of development will get there.
Yeah.
But it's fair to say in those extreme northern fringes, northeastern fringes, there would still be areas where people live very simple lives.
It could be similar to there's parts of Australia where like indigenous peoples are still living in it's a primitive way, right? Yeah. Like there's townships and that, but like I read something recently, and they've obviously the Australian government has managed that extremely poorly, and done a terrible job of having opportunities for indigenous people. But there's a town where there's 20 different tribes crammed into one town, with like really long and complex historical issues, right? Like tribes don't always get on, and then you sort of mash everyone together. Living in poverty, bit of alcohol, and then things come up. Like so, the recent thing was like a guy got speared in the head. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like the idea that there's spears going around sort of gives the thought that it's kind of that's kind of primitive. Yeah.
But I think you got to respect, right? Unless there's an understanding of cultures and where people come from, you'll have this in any. You have this in the most developed of societies, right? Put two people from different societies and just let them loose. Yeah, if there isn't some level of sensitivity training, people don't just like each other. Yeah,
mash everyone together in London.
Yep.
It's just not a spear; it's a knife.
It is. So I think people tend to be the same, right? We don't like change. We don't like something that's different from us. We don't like if it doesn't look like us. So I think those are very basic. That's human nature at its rawest form, and I think that's what we all have to overcome as people, right?
I was talking about this to someone. I think it was 2 or 3 nights ago, and I was like thinking that because it's intrinsically linked to like racism and things like this to a certain extent, right? It's like why is that even in us? Like it shouldn't fucking matter. It shouldn't be there. But like if you if this is like human time as we know it now, it's just this, right? So all this other stuff was like very tribal, very like primitive, right? Like so if you or me are like in a tribe and we're hanging out and we do our thing, there's about 50 of us or whatever, and then we see someone that's different, that's danger.
It's danger.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't know if they're hostile, like they're wearing different headdresses or whatever, loincloths or whatever we're wearing.
Look, through time, we were hunter-gatherers, right? That's what the human race was. So if you...
Which meant you're on the move.
You're on the move, and you're all fighting for the same resources, right? So if you saw another tribe, unless somehow you made peace, chances were you're not going to like each other.
Which probably happened, and there was trade.
There was trade, right? So, but that comes from that very basic nature of who we are, right? As a people, that's how we evolved.
Because up in Tibet, I know that they have like they have a lot of like jewelry and stuff like that, and there's one particular thing that is like a red coral. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
probably
like,
a garnet stone or something like that.
well, no, but I think it is actually a coral. It's not
Coral.
a. It's not a. It's not a precious stone.
It's not a precious stone. Okay.
Yeah, but that's come. Unless there's an ancient sea up there,
So
that's come from the sea, right? Like, and that's going to have to happen through trade.
But I believe that the Himalayas at some point were below the sea as well, right? Like many other mountain
Is
ranges.
it?
So because
Really?
of tectonic activity, these guys,
Okay.
that kind of, when these tectonic plates smash together, you create these.
And it
hills.
brings
Yeah,
everything
that's
up
right.
with it.
It could be that also, but I'm not an
right.
expert on that. So
No,
it
but I
also be
like
yeah.
that idea.
I should go and research this after this, right? Is there something like that occurred?
No, we make up loads of stuff on this. You have free reign to change history. Don't put, yeah, you're in a very powerful position.
All right.
Yeah,
But very conscious we shouldn't mislead people either, right? So,
yes, in all seriousness, yes. You mentioned like Nagaland.
Yeah.
Like, so Nagaland, because India is so vast. Like, is it 20 countries in one? It's more than 10 countries in one.
It is. No, it's I would say language changes every 30 or 45 minutes. You could have a dialect. The dialect would change. The way the language is spoken would change.
Serious?
No, it's a fact.
What?
Yeah.
Driving.
Driving, yeah.
Not
No,
25
driving.
minutes
No, driving. If you drive a good 45 minutes in any place, you'll see the culture
language
slowly.
could be different.
The language, the way it's spoken, the words that get used, starts changing subtly.
Wow.
The food changes,
Yeah.
for sure, right?
In
India,
in that short
In
distance.
that short, I could go from, say, I was born in this town called Pune, or Pune as it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And
Where is that?
This is west of Bombay, southwest of Bombay. So,
Okay.
but up in the hills. Bombay is, on sea level, and Pune is a town that's in the hills. We share a lot historically with even a city like Singapore, right? It was a place where in World War II, we've had large hospitals in Pune. It was an army cantonment during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Same as Singapore, this was also a huge cantonment for the Allied troops, right? So, so if I went from Pune and I started driving to another town called Ahmednagar, which is again where I lived for some time, what you eat changes, the spice level changes, and it's as subtle as that, right? So you may be eating similar food, but the spice levels may be different.
Yeah.
And this is true for every part of India, right? Yeah, so it's
so cool.
Yeah.
So where we're from, you drive like 45 minutes down the road, and it's like, people are still eating the same terrible hamburgers or fish and chips or whatever like that.
yeah. No, I think that's India's got a really rich food history, right? And
Yeah.
there's so much of the food which is, I think what's become mainstream in the UK, for example. Like I have friends who are, who are British, and they'd say that as part of their regular weekly diet, a chicken tikka masala
Chicken
is
tikka
probably
masala is
something
it's the national dish in
So I'm
the
like,
UK.
I was like, wow. So
But
that's,
no one in India has ever tasted
that's
that
correct,
chicken
right?
tikka
But
masala.
it's that little crossover dish that went and kind of became popular, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's tons of food cultures in India, and I keep learning about them myself. Like I have friends here from different parts of India, and when they invite me to their place, it's like, I've never eaten this in my entire life, and it's delicious. But where was this all these years? Because I haven't been to that part of the country, right? So I would not know, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, what I was going to say about Nagaland is like the people there, like visually, like in their face, they're so different to what people would typically think of what an Indian person looks like, right?
Absolutely.
Like, because their face is very almost Tibetan, right?
Tibetan, they're like, one could say Mongoloid or even Chinese because of the features, right? And the complexion. Because it's those influences. It's also, you're living up in the hills. It's not as sunny as the plains.
Right.
You're hardier. Your stature is different because you're used to a different set of skills, and as compared to somebody on the plains.
Yeah.
But Nagaland is amazing, and you have the Nagas as people at some point in time wanted their own independent state, right? So if you go back into the history of India, there was a large movement to liberate Nagaland, and but you're trying to be. India was still a young emerging country, and you don't want this country breaking up, right? You want to have the Union of India, and you want all the states together.
Because it's like a domino.
there's a domino effect, right?
Right.
And you know, India is still a new concept, right? There wasn't something called India till 47. It's these princely states that came together under the Republic of India. So, but you know, the concept of Hindustan or the various states that came in the Indian peninsula, that did exist, but often these were princely states that were autonomous, or you know, and had their own culture, and they went to war with each other as well. So to some extent,
So there was military
there was a lot
activity.
of military activity. So the history of India is quite amazing, and yeah, but you could spend years just learning about everything that
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
So from, you know, so from within the peninsula, you had various dynasties that became really powerful. So for example, that's why you have Bali has a Hindu culture.
Yeah. What? How did
It's,
that?
it's
how did
these-
it get there?
These earlier dynasties that existed, right? That had through trade, had a massive influence all across Southeast Asia, across this entire set of islands that make up Southeast Asia. That's why Thailand has so much of a Hindu type culture as well. The
Yeah.
dancing,
Well, the script, right?
The script,
It's
yep.
based on Sanskrit,
right? Which is why in Malaysia you have words like the Istana, they all come from there. So I think that influence has been through trade, at some point through dynasties that were really quite powerful. And like dynasties, you know, they come and go. One reaches a peak, starts weakening, the other one comes in. More recently, I think in recent history, you had the Mughal Empire, which, you know, kind of peak was really strong from the 1500s all the way till the late 1700s.
Right.
And then got marginalized. Within India, also I think the British East India Company fought against them. And the last Mughal emperor actually got exiled, I think in Burma, actually.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's been this, you know, I think there's like several layers to understand India, right? There's culture on culture on culture. So that's why there's that. I have this term that an Israeli entrepreneur gave me, the rich tapestry of life. You actually experience that as you travel across India.
I can
And
imagine.
Nagaland is fantastic. It's beautiful. The people are lovely.
But that just looks like a whole different country. But like it looks like you can really see, besides visually, like their unique culture, and they're also supposed to be like fierce warriors.
They're
Aren't they?
they're extremely good warriors. They have, yeah.
Are they integrated as part of the army? Like, because you're from a military family,
Yes,
right?
yes. No, so there was a time when my dad was serving. At that point, there was this liberation movement for Nagaland that was active, and I think those days it was called insurgency. Today you call it internal terrorism. They're different words, right?
Right.
But we actually went into an active zone. So, for example, I could never. So we were in a base camp. Let's call it a base camp, where my father was posted in the regiment. But if we were traveling, and we had to travel with him because there was a death threat on his life.
Right.
So as family members, we could not stay back if my dad was not there. So we would actually travel with him, and we, so in, you know, you would have a regiment and you'd have post, right?
So sorry, you had to go with him?
Yeah.
And there was a death threat on
against
his
my
life?
father, yeah, and therefore against his
Wouldn't
family.
you be like, no, Dad, you go?
No,
we'll
we
wait
were,
here.
No, I don't think.
I'm joking.
No, yeah, but no, we just went, right?
Yeah.
We've traveled, so we've been in convoy. So yeah, it's quite an interesting childhood. Very cool childhood. I think very privileged, but you know, you don't worry about the danger.
How do you find out there's a death threat on your life?
My dad told me this years later. I mean, he didn't
Yeah, he
obviously
didn't tell
tell me
you at
that.
the time.
No, at that time we just knew it was, you know, tense, but he never told us.
Was he quite prominent to have a threat put on him?
So he was like the commanding officer of a regiment, serving in an area where there was insurgency. So in a way, he was the enemy.
Right, and
yeah.
that regiment was there to like kind of
To maintain the peace, to ensure that, you know, insurgency did not take place, and you know, it was
and that involves combat sometimes.
It does involve combat. So
Right.
so traveling in those days, it's like, you know, if you've seen Bridge on the River Kwai and you see these little army convoys where you got a jeep, the old type Willys jeep with a light machine gun there, and then that's vehicle number one. Vehicle number two is my dad's jeep. We were never allowed to travel in that.
Wow.
So he would be there with, you know,
Guns and
weaponized,
people around him.
people around him. So we were like somewhere in the middle of the convoy as family. But the reality was that in every army post there were troops, and there were their wives, or there was, you know, villages around. And they did a lot of developmental work within those communities, right? So the army doctors would travel with us. If there was a shortage of food, we would try and help out. And I think that development effort that's put in is probably a very good way to overcome barriers, right? That's what I learned from my father, actually, and I think, if you look at what the US was supposed to do in Afghanistan was to do development work, right?
Right.
But what we realized years later was that money got siphoned. There was really no development to show.
Yeah, they kind of
but if you do that development work, I think that's when you win people over. And that happened over a period of time that my dad was there. He actually did a lot of that.
We helped families and helped lives and helped
lives,
raise the level or quality of life.
Quality of life. And, these villages also have natural disasters. So if you step in at a time and you go to help, then people think you're not so terrible after all. Right?
Yeah. Okay, it's very interesting.
So as a result, so my mom would be, as his wife, she was responsible for the welfare of the troops and their wives, and therefore she led that effort. So
really?
Yeah. And that's the beauty of army life.
So like they're
it's like a team, But
it's not just dads in the army.
No. But
you're all in the army.
We're all in the army, right? So especially in these forward camps, right? It's probably lesser in civilian, in peace postings. But when you're up there in these areas, the spouse plays a very active role, and it's not an official role, right? You don't get paid for it, but you do it because it's important. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So did he ever send you up in the hills and say like, "Oh, I need you to create a natural disaster. Just push this rock, just a little avalanche, Tarun. No one will know."
I was told
and then it all happens, and then your dad comes in and goes, "No, we'll fix this."
My dad told me, "Don't. Please be on your best behavior,
okay,
right? You are not going to misbehave. You can't be this brat." Yeah.
Then how...
It was the opposite. I was told, better behave.
What's the role then? So, okay, your dad, commanding officer.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, "Oh shit, Tarun's dad's here. I better be on my best behavior."
Yeah.
You're not creating any avalanches.
Yeah.
The enemy's over there and they're a bit unruly. Like, what role does your mother play then?
So my mom, travels when we go like this, because we had to travel as a family. But her time was really spent with the troops' wives, right? So if there were, and just any women that in the village, it was to go and visit, and So and women have a different way of getting their message across, right? I think it comes from doesn't come from an adversarial point of view necessarily, right? You can go as a lady and chat with people, and even if language is a barrier, you can still do sign language. A smile always helps, right?
Yeah.
So the role there was more as a
like bonding,
I would say, like a goodwill ambassador, if that's the word to use. Yeah, it's you do it because you think it's important to do, and yeah.
So, but she would be like with the other soldiers with their wives. It's kind of like social and sort of like
it is social,
but also bringing that social side to good and to make friends with the local people.
It does. So you kind of extend it beyond your, the community of your troops, and if you have a chance to meet with villages close by, I remember we would walk to those villages. We would meet the local headmen. We would be welcomed by and large, right? So because they had no, there's a political movement, but at the most basic level, people in these remote locations just be happy to meet people, right?
So it's sort of putting all the political thing goes to the side, and sort of like your dad has to look after that, where like your mum
can be just the
behind
person
enemy lines almost.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
And we never looked at it as enemy lines, right? There's a clear demarcation of what was the men's world, and there was all this other stuff that had to happen.
Right.
So it is.
So then did they ever disagree? Like, because she would have seen a different side, right? Because your dad's operating on orders from above.
That's right.
And your dad can't sort of go, actually, I kind of get it. The Naga people, they should have their independence. Do you know what I mean? He can't have that point of view where your mum might gel with them socially and kind of have more of an empathy, or...
I think the empathy would be there, but, you don't practice politics when you're in the army, right? The soldier does his job. And luckily my father probably had good commanding, officers he was reporting into that supported a development approach as opposed to an adversarial approach. So I don't think there was ever a conflict in that area. We looked at, we met people, we we were won over by their own warmth and hospitality, and felt comfortable.
Right.
So yeah, I got to know about all of this stuff much later in my life. My dad, oh, by the way, did you know this? Like, no, I didn't.
Shit. Wow.
Yeah, there's that.
And then how long would you guys spend in these?
So typical, we do like sometimes a 10-day trip, which was the longest I've been away from school. So
Okay.
and then sometimes they were 3 or 4 days, right? But
Okay. So you would get posted. He would get
sorry.
posted to a region for maybe a
sorry.
couple of years.
A couple of years. Typically, you'd look at 2 years if you're lucky. And I remember, I think at one point, I was in school in Pune, and my dad came into school at 3 in the afternoon and said, "We've got to go."
Oh,
And
just
I
like
thought,
that.
yeah, we got to go. I thought, oh, okay, we're going out somewhere. So my dad's come to pick me up. He wasn't even in the same town. He was posted a town that was about 2 hours away from where we were. And all he did was we jumped onto a train that very evening, and we went to Manipur. And I never said bye-bye.
How
to
far
all the
away
friends.
is Manipur?
Manipur was a 3.5-day journey for us from Pune. So because you kind of, you do one part in train, you do one part by drive, and then you do another part.
And you never saw your friends again?
Nope, till I think I went back to the 9th grade, but I went to a different school. And somebody said, I think we've heard your name. Are you the same guy? But yeah, never said bye-bye. Just walked out of class one day, and that was it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that was just part of your life growing up?
That was part of my life, yeah. I've done, I think, 11 or 12 towns. I've lost count, about 8 or 9 schools.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. How did that sort of... I mean, that shapes you. It's a different life to most people.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think that's shaped you differently to other people?
You know, at one level you feel, shit, I wish I was in the same place, because, you know, when you come into a new school, you have, you know, you're trying to break into friendships there. So that's always difficult. At another level, you go with the flow, right? You learn to adapt, and you learn to accept, and you move on. So I think for me, it taught me to be adaptable. It taught me that, look, there is no constant. Change is the constant. It's a big mantra we hear, but that was, you know, pretty much what we grew up with. And I think me and my brother sometimes reflect about that, and we think we were just lucky, right? We think it's a privilege to have seen that and move on with life. Yeah.
But do you think that sort of not being rooted to one or two family homes, or, you know, like I think growing up I had 2 places as such that I grew up, but you had so many. Do you think that sort of made it like, so now you live in a different country, it's probably nothing to you, where some people that'd be like, oh wow, shit, I've got to move country.
No, it does. Look, I think everybody wants roots, right, at some level. So to some extent, my hometown where I was born, Pune, which is where my grandmother was, that became home base for me, right? So no matter where we would spend a holiday back in Pune. So that became one route.
That was the constant.
That was the constant, right? That we could always go back. My dad comes from the northern part of India, but, you know, because my mom's parents were here, or by then only her mother was alive, coming back to Pune was the constant, right? Whereas my father's family also moved from their hometown, the family spread to different parts of the country. So I had one route always to go back. And my parents are still there, so that's still my second home. Singapore's my first home, that's my second home, or vice versa, depending on where you now, you know, how you look at it, right? So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's...
And then, so, tell me about, like, the caste system.
Okay.
Yeah. I jumped around a bit there, but like, because we were sort of talking about the poverty before, and I don't want to. I don't want to miss it, because I think people know about it outside of India, right? Yeah. And like, I don't know so much about it. You know, when I was there, I could see poverty, and I could see like the difference in lives and stuff like that. Where did it even come from?
Yeah, look, I think it came from this idea of division of labor, right? There are different, so go back historically, there was this concept of division of labor. So you had people who were priests, so they became the priestly class. And then there were people who were warriors, so they became the warrior class. There were people who were traders, they became the trading class. And then there were this group of people who were considered people that were involved in cleaning and you know, lower end tasks, and they became another group of people, right? Okay.
Was it considered like more like servant, or
Not servant as much as that's what your stature in life is, right? It got associated with something else,
right?
right? So I think that was the genesis, right? It was this kind of things that people did. But when I look at that, right, I think there's always maybe a time and a place for something. There had to be some reason why it got created.
Is there a point in time where it occurred? Like, was there like a ruling person that came in and said, from this day forward, you guys will do that, you will do that, and you will do that?
I don't know the genesis. I mean, I don't know how far back in our history that goes, or the culture it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think of that, and there's this newer sentence that I learned recently, that the future cannot be held in containers of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That means maybe there was a time and a place for something like that, but society has moved on, we've moved on. I think that needs to go away. I think it's going away, but it definitely did exist. And I think there's also a difference between affluence and the class and the caste system. They're three different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
One could be affluent no matter where you are, but
someone in the lower class would never be affluent, right?
That was the challenge, right? So that's why the government created reservation and created posts and things like that. So in a way, it was not inclusive, right? That's the word we would use. I think that had to change. I think it's changing. It's changing with every generation because we are slowly getting rid of the past. Not getting rid of the past in a bad way, but I think we are trying to move beyond that now, right?
Try to move with the times.
And evolve.
And create some
and
equality.
Equality, right? So I think, look, so it did exist. It had I think it's growing up, and when you, and this was prevalent even while growing up. It's there in marriages, it's there in society, it's how people look at each other.
So you couldn't marry outside of your caste?
You couldn't marry outside of your caste. That's still practiced sometimes, even today, right?
Right.
But now there's this entire younger generation of Indians who are marrying across caste, across religion, it's changing. Yeah? I think it'll take us another couple of generations for us to be past that.
Really?
And truly, yeah. As long as we don't go down a path of, there's always a newer way to divide people, right? So, and I think as long as we stay focused on development, I think that should be the only agenda for the world. But don't think it's a great past that we've had where this is concerned. Like I said, it may have had a reason for it.
It's a form of apartheid in a way, right?
It is that. It's segregation, right? It is that. So apartheid was associated with people of color vis-a-vis people of white skin. This is segregation again, right? I think any form of segregation is unnatural, right?
And this one's just based on economic class?
It's based on economic class and what somebody did more by their trade and profession than that kind of defined who they were and their stature in life. So in a way, what you had was the hierarchy was the priestly families, then became the educated families, and they were top of the rung. Then there was the next, which were the warriors, and then there were the traders, and then there were the shudras, which were the menial class.
So that's the lower class is called that shudras.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
But again, look, I'm sure there's a more sophisticated framework to that I'm, not the best person. But that concept, I think, creates damage, right? It kind of says, this is who you are, and that's how you shall remain for the rest of your life. I think that's the construct which is appalling, right? And I think that's why I think that's a container of the past. It can't hold our future. Right?
And there's no ethnic difference, no visual difference, because as we were talking about humans, they've got someone's different, so that's freaky.
Look, there will be differences, right? Because look, as we had invasions in the country, people from the north moved to the south. So you had the Aryans and the Dravidians, and the Dravidians tend to be more darker skinned, and the Aryans were lighter skinned, and there's a bunch of that. So there'll always be differences in how people look.
Right.
But I think this was far deeper than the color of your skin, right? This is who you are based on what your family did traditionally. Therefore, you can never grow out of that.
But right? Is there a skin color thing to it? Because from what I can tell, like the ideals of what beauty is in India, like you see a lot of the Bollywood stars, they've got very fair skin. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if you were sort of darker skinned, say from the south, but you grew up in the north, were you more likely to be
Achudra?
Look, no, it wouldn't be that. I
Okay.
think that's why. So I think that beauty is skin deep. But in that case, I think it was far deeper, right? That system evolved from a very different need, I guess, right?
Okay.
But color of skin is still a big issue, right? So there's an emphasis on being fair.
There is in India,
Still,
right?
right? If you have a brand called Fair and Lovely, which says you can get fairer, and
That's-
it's all about that, right?
That's going to
That's-
be. It's
yeah.
going to take the market, over the market.
And it has, right? It is actually a brand, and people, they want to look good.
Because
But-
in Asia,
yeah.
there's products on the shelf
Yep.
that
To make the skin
loudly
fairer,
and
yeah.
proudly
Say,
state like
I will make your
whitening.
skin whitening, right? So, but I think that's also going away now, right? Because you now start looking at, there's Bollywood, but there's a even larger movie industry called Tollywood and Collywood, which is all the films coming out of the South.
Oh, really?
And they give a rat's ass because, they've got talent that's so good that's becoming mainstream cinema now in India, right? So if you see the largest, they say cinema is a good reflection of society, right? It truly is, right? It's one of those interesting ones. Like the Marlboro Man was, the reason it was such a classic ad was because it reflected post-World War a need to be independent and be your own, and that was
because
the
he
true
was up in the
inspiration.
mountains.
That's right.
And
So
there was no borders for him.
That's
and
right.
He rode his horse and sparked up a Marlboro.
But that was that was the underlying motivational research, right? So I think now we're seeing this. You're seeing. I was chatting with some friends the other day. They're saying, "Did you see this new movie?" And like, no, I haven't. And it's a big hit out of South India, but it's making more money than the Bollywood hits, right? And guess what?
So
It's like-
Bollywood. I always thought Bollywood represented cinema coming out of India.
No,
Is it not?
no, it's not. Bollywood is just now one of the big hubs of cinema.
So Bollywood is cinema coming out of what area?
Out of Bombay. So literally Bombay.
Oh, it's
so
the
it
BO is the-
yeah, that's why it's because that's where the largest studios were. So traditionally, that's where the film industry grew.
So if I made a movie in Trivandrum,
Yep.
it wouldn't be considered a Bollywood
No, it would be
movie.
Collywood. So,
Really?
yeah.
Because that's interesting because the biggest film
Yeah.
industry is Hollywood.
Right.
Second biggest is Bollywood.
Bollywood, right?
Do you know
But
the third?
I would suspect it's either Tollywood, which is from Andhra Pradesh, or Chennai. So these two
It's
hubs, right?
Nollywood.
It's not. Yes, you're right. From Nigeria and those. Yes,
Exactly.
yep.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you actually put the sheer number of productions, if somebody should really do that, we think these guys may have to relook at their numbers, I think.
Yeah.
I read the Nollywood one because of Netflix announced a deal, right, for creating
Did
content.
they?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Netflix, there was I think that's where I read something like that. But I would be surprised that the numbers coming out of these two southern hubs in India are huge.
Are you rewriting the history again right now?
No,
Tarun?
no, I'm not. No history needs to be rewritten. I'm just.
Once again, I'm proven to be extremely ignorant. So Bollywood is just Bombay.
Is the let me more than Bombay. It could be shot in Bombay. It could be shot anywhere in the country, but it's where Hindi is the medium, I would say, right? Hindi
Okay,
is
so that's what makes it unique,
Yeah.
like the Hindi,
The Hindi is,
Hindu sort of
It's
language.
the language. It's
Okay.
it's all done in Hindi, and that's the main language. Then we had a movement in India where there was a lot of independent movies being made, right? So there's a whole genre of guys who produce independent movies. Then we had the crossover movies like Bend It Like Beckham, right?
Okay. Slumdog Millionaire.
Slumdog Millionaire was also a crossover because it was made with a Western view on the slums in India. So I would call it crossover, yeah, because
It was
made
white
from
people Bollywood.
That's it was more that, but it represented a slum and slum life in India in this area, right? Which is, yeah. So we had that, and now you've got these two big hubs in Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad, and Chennai, which is producing mega hits, and they've always had a very rich movie culture. They had their own little movie culture happening, but it was restricted to that region. But now they've gone and produced these movies with computer generated graphics and really pushed the boundaries of technology, and they've suddenly become mainstream. Now those movies are being dubbed into Hindi and subtitled, and they're making huge waves as well. So
Would the other ones from Chennai and was it Tollywood? Was it?
yep, yeah.
Would they have that musical element where like
There is
suddenly
always a melody.
everyone's like on a bus You're looking out the window and then suddenly like someone breaks into song sort of thing.
Song has to be part of the Indian storytelling.
No matter what.
No matter what.
Why? Because
have
when
my
I
own-
was
I have my own
there, I
theory,
never
right?
ever was
No,
walking
you-
down
you-
the street and
you won't
like
see
the whole
people
street
dancing
didn't
on the
start
streets,
spinning
no.
around and start singing to me.
I'm almost worried. This is my take, okay, and I could be terribly wrong, but I think we were influenced a lot as a country by the musicals that came out, right? If you look at the early hits from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the biggest ones tended to be musicals, I think.
Okay.
And I'm almost fine. And they all had song and dance in them, right? And I think in a country where there were a lot of social taboos and, how could you, and kissing was not allowed on screen till, it's the more recent phenomena, how could you portray romance, right?
And you could do that through dance.
Through music and dance and expression. So that's the reason why it's become such a big part of movie making. And if, for a movie to be really popular in our country, it has to have great music.
Yeah.
The biggest hits of Indian movies have amazing music, right?
Right.
And sometimes the music makes more money than the movie, yeah. But it's that whole that storytelling is expressed that way. Now, I think it looks silly sometimes, but
Do you think like maybe there's an element of escapism to it?
of course there's escapism.
Like
it has to be.
Because whenever they're dancing as well, they're so happy. There's so much happiness coming out.
There is escapism.
It's
right?
getting away from.
It's the most basic part of storytelling, right? Is to create this happy moment and actually there are these movies where growing up as a kid you'd go and people would be dancing and clapping and whistling because they're so deeply engaged with that storytelling, right? And that's why it is. There has to be escapism. It has to be aspirational, and I think the stories are changing now, right? As society is changing, the stories are changing. People are taking up topics that could be downright controversial. So there's a lot of that as well. But mainstream commercial movie making has to be about escapism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I saw a movie recently on Netflix. It was called 83.
That was the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
That's yeah.
So,
yeah.
but it was cool because like I kind of remember that time, right? Like I'm pretty young.
Yeah.
Like I'm 8.
Yeah, I was probably a few years older than you at that time.
But like I remember, this is Australia. You watch cricket, and I just there was certain things in the film like most of the players like I could remember them and I didn't know like who was in that team. Obviously, it's like Kapil Dev was the captain, but there was the guy Srikanth.
Srikanth, yes,
And
Srikanth's quite a character.
All I remember was whenever he played, like he was like a psychopath.
Yep.
Like there was nothing like sort of defensive. He was like a swashbuckling swordsman that would just come out and like just swat at the ball.
And that was his style, right?
Yeah.
He said that's the only game he knows how to play. He's unabashedly. That's what I'm going to do.
In the movie, he says like, I don't know defense.
I don't know defense.
And they're all like, oh.
But that was I think that was a coming of age for Indian sport, right? If you look again,
the way that the movie portrayed it, it was like a coming of age of a nation because
they all
got together behind.
it was
something.
a huge proud moment for us, right? Look at one level, like we think we are now 1.3 billion people, and are we making our mark, in sports the way we should of a nation of so much of people? And you see China and you see the US, etc. So I think sports kind of got suppressed a little bit, right? Because if you're working, and I think all of us growing up, right, if you played a sport and you played it well, your teachers would tell you now stop and start studying because there's no future. There's no future in sport, right?
Is a strong push towards the academics.
Absolutely. My 10th grade teacher said, "Son, look, now please stop, right? You can't play any more football."
What were you playing? Soccer?
Football, yeah. I played soccer, yeah. I played a lot
good?
of soccer. Yeah, I was pretty good. I played for the school, I played for the college, I played for the district, and I could have gone further up.
You could have gone the English Premier League.
No,
except for that
I
teacher
don't
who's
think I had. No, I don't think I had the talent.
No?
I think I was kind of middling, right? So
Okay.
that faded very quickly. But that's pretty much the way most people were guided, right?
Right.
But that's changed now, and I think for us that team of underdogs, right? No one gave them any chance, right?
Because
it was just that.
All I knew from where I stood as a kid was like, you don't know the backstory,
right?
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like say, back then the West Indies was the
They were
cricket superpower.
tremendous. They were the superpower.
Yeah, but like they'll put the fear of God into people, right? So how nobody died, I've no idea. Like the ball is so hard.
For sure, yeah.
And that thing, it's bouncing on the ground and
Smashing you,
people in the head.
Yeah.
Like, and just...
No, it was terrifying to watch that, that line about Joel Garner.
Yeah,
they were
Garner,
tremendous. Yeah.
Holding, Andy Roberts,
and there was
Malcolm Marshall.
Yeah. He was fierce, right?
Yeah, and they were intimidating, but they used intimidation tactics. You know what I mean?
For sure, yeah. Viv Richards, right? Viv Richards walking. I mean, he was an ace, right?
He was just like super cool, just like walk to the wicket.
Yep.
He was always chewing his gum.
Yep.
And then I don't know, did he play with his gum? I think he played with his gum, and when he got out, he'd walk back to the pavilion and he'd spit the gum and hit it with the bat.
Well, that I don't know, but he was, but yeah, this team, it's etched in our memories, right? We couldn't believe we were doing. We started off with a couple of really bad starts, and then it kind of just became this dream run.
Well, the story in the movie, and this is the bit I guess why I didn't know about, like coming from another country, is like you guys, as far as the Indian people were concerned, you had no hope. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And this the tournament was in the UK.
Yes.
Where they're in
this is the mecca of cricket, right?
It's the mecca of cricket, but it's also like, as a game, it's for the upper class in general, especially back then, where like in Australia, anyone played cricket.
Anyone played cricket.
Same as in India,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And the obviously the British were the colonial ruler sort of thing, and you guys were sort of going to their country to hopefully win, but have no chance as far as the rest of the world. And it seemed all of India
considered that,
and
they had never won this.
The tickets, it looked like they had to really like scrounge for their own money everything. Their allowance to buy food when they were there was nothing, and their tickets were booked back,
that's right.
Before the semi-finals, because it was just like,
you're going to go there and come back. You won't make it, right?
Yeah. But they triumphed.
They triumphed, and I think it's again the spirit of, I think, one person, the captain, who was inspirational. He was our first true all-rounder. He was a fast bowler. Otherwise, India was known for spin bowlers, right? We had medium pace and spin, but this was a medium to fast bowler, wanting to make the country proud. He carried the passion for the game, right?
He was the driving force, right?
He was the magnet that kind of pulled people together. And then I would say they came together as a team, right? I mean, they were more talented teams for sure, but I think these guys just got together as a team, and I think they peaked when it mattered, right? I think that's what happened.
Champion team,
that's
better
right.
than a team of champions.
That's right.
Yeah,
I think that's what happened. And I think, I mean, when I watched the movie, and I did, we actually went, and I think this was the first movie I watched in a theater after the pandemic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I could remember those moments, right? I still remember these guys running back towards the pavilion, picking up
with
the stumps.
Yeah.
With the stumps, right? That's kind of etched, and I'm wondering, man, it must have been such an emotional moment for all of us.
I got emotional when I watched it.
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of like watching it, getting like a little bit teary. I'm like, it's a movie about cricket. Why am I doing that?
No, but I think it was a huge impact. It was the coming of age. I think it was the reckoning that, look, sports is important, and can we give it and that led to, I think, look at where we are on sporting, where cricket is concerned, right? There's now the Indian IPL, which is probably the biggest money spinner for cricket globally, right? So that's become a big powerhouse for cricketing talent, and we're getting talent from different parts of the world as well, right? So it's amazing to watch these, the talent coming out of India itself, and then these other players from all over the world, from Australia, from England, from the West Indies, coming in and playing here. Is massive, I think, right?
Yeah.
But it's also led to other sports now. For example, there's a football league.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Which is becoming quite popular, and it's getting more and more money. There's a kabaddi league, which is, it's a little game we play where, it's a little rectangular zone, and there's a dividing line, and you're supposed to go and tag the other person and run back, and it's a really interesting
like dodgeball, but with no ball.
There's no ball, right? So
what's it called? Kabaddi.
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 You have to hold your breath. Right?
You've got to hold your breath, and that's
the
right.
way they prove that they're holding their breath, they have to keep saying kabaddi. Kabaddi. They're saying that the whole time.
Really?
Yeah.
To prove that they're not inhaling.
It sounds like a game that should be played underwater.
It's an awesome game.
It's an awesome game. It's
Really?
Yeah, it's a
It's
tremendous.
really cool. I
Yeah.
used to watch it. There used to be this thing called Trans World Sport.
Yes, yes.
Which was on at like 7 in the morning or something ridiculous like that. And it was on there. So
Yeah.
it's sports from around the world.
Yep.
And I loved it. It was
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
And that's become an entire league now. And I think now Disney, but Star, which is a big content broadcaster in India, they created this entire league, and they've got badminton. So there's more and more sports becoming mainstream now, right?
Hang
so
on, can we go back to
Kabaddi,
Kabaddi? This
yes.
game that you have to hold your breath.
hold your breath and
Okay, how big's the pitch?
gosh, I wish I know. It's probably the size of this room, maybe a little larger.
This
a
is
little,
the size of the studio.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like a dividing line in between, and
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
like half the size of a squash court.
it's probably say squash court.
Probably
Yeah,
the
squash
size
court,
of a
the
squash
size of
court,
the squash
yeah.
court.
How
yeah,
many
yeah.
players on each team?
Gosh, you got me now. I think it's 6 or 7, something like that.
Okay,
I
so
need
it's
to look
pretty-
this up. Yeah, it's
pretty
and it's
packed out.
very athletic.
There's
yeah.
a line down the middle.
Yep. And then, yeah.
Can anyone go to the other side?
No, so there's a sequence by which you go and you hold your breath and you go, and then you're basically baiting the other guys to try and catch you.
Right.
And if they kind of catch you on the other side of the line, they win a point. But if you've kind of
Catch,
touched somebody,
like tackle?
yeah, tackle, right? There's a
Okay, so
whole
it's
lot
quite
of-
physical.
It's physical. It's a great game actually.
Okay, so when you, so I'm on the red team.
Yep.
And it's my turn to go over there.
Yeah.
I've got to hold my breath.
Yep.
Run over.
Yep.
I've got to tackle them,
Yes.
or they've got to tackle me.
No, so you gotta bait them into tackling you,
Right.
and as part of that, you want to be able to tag them and get away without getting
Oh, so
drag
I've
down.
just got to like touch them.
and then run
and then
back,
get back.
without them actually tackling you on the other side.
Right,
of the
and
line.
they've got to get away, not let me touch
Yeah,
them,
that's right.
or
Or
decide
they
to actually I'm going to smash you. Okay.
bring you down, right? And that's the.
Right.
And I've forgotten the point system, but we played it growing up, and it was great fun. And it doesn't need anything, right? All
Yeah,
you
yeah.
need
It
is
sounds like a game that you
Yeah.
not
There's-
a game that you play at school,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's become an entire league now. That's an indigenous local sport that's done
That's
extremely
cool.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's to me, it's like this is how you develop your athleticism and fitness in the country, right? By getting more and more sport into mainstream.
Oh,
So
do they ever
it's
have fights?
Look, every sport will have a fight, right?
Okay,
But I
because
think
it
we
sounds
played
like a physical
It
sport.
is, yeah. But
Yeah.
look, even in football, right? You're not supposed to. You can tackle people, and you can tackle people, right?
Yeah.
Depends on who's on the other side.
You can
and,
tackle people like Roy Keane
Yeah. And then
above the knee,
above the
studs
knees.
out.
Yeah, studs out,
Yeah.
or or you tackle, the way that you're supposed to tackle, right? So you can always be.
Oh, that's quite
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I need to check that game out.
You must. It is.
So there's
ahead
a
of us.
league
He
of
actually,
that.
yeah. I've forgotten about the holding your breath part. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that adds a different
Yeah.
element to
That
it.
adds a completely
You
different
can
element to
imagine
it,
like the like way back when they're inventing it or it's being played and someone's going, there's something missing, like
Just hold your breath, guys.
you gotta hold your breath. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's it, right? Yeah, and you got to keep, and you have to be heard, right? You can't be muttering below your breath.
Yeah,
Kabaddi
yeah.
it has to be heard, otherwise yeah.
What does the word mean? Does it have
Gosh,
a
I'll have
meaning?
to look this up.
I don't know.
Let's look this up,
I can
folks.
have a quick look.
I need
Yeah.
to look this up now. Kyle, over
That's
to
a
you.
wild game.
I'm gonna
Have
see
you
if I can
have you
find-
seen that other game? It's called it's the fastest sport in the world. The reason I remember it was Kyle was sort of saying this transport show
Right.
or whatever. It's kind of like squash, and the guys have the people have like it's like a sickle shaped thing.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, and you kind of
And they
hurl it,
catch
right?
it
Yeah,
and
catch it and
fling
fling
it
it. Yeah,
back
yeah.
like that, yeah.
I've never played that. I mean, I haven't seen it in action,
I
but
don't
yeah.
know how you would.
Yeah.
But like I remember those types of
Yeah.
programs,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
occasionally seeing this
Seeing
sport,
those, yeah.
and some American guys sort of try to put a lot of money
Money
behind,
behind
it,
it, yep.
and it never went anywhere. But
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like one of those, right?
Yeah. But the good thing about this game is, right, there's no capital investment needed, right? We just play this on
You just
on
need a
any
square
sports
and a
field. Yeah.
line.
Yeah, that's pretty. And you drew the line on the mud, right? So in a way, it was pretty simple to do.
Yeah, right.
Or we'd put chalk, like the way you'd lay out a football field in the olden days, right? Just before a match, you'd have chalk powder, and you'd actually mark out the
Yeah.
boundaries and the center line and
Yeah.
the penalty and the penalty spot.
Mm.
You can just mark it out that way.
Yeah, right.
According to Google,
Yes.
so I take no responsibility for this, the word kabaddi is derived from the Tamil words kai pidi, which literally means hold hands.
Hold hands,
So
yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah, because the team on
It's a
that side is,
chain,
yeah,
yeah,
it's a
it's a
chain,
chain.
right? Yeah.
Oh.
They have to
Yeah.
stay linked. I
They
think
stay
if they
linked.
break the link,
Yeah, then the
then you lose.
Oh, and someone's over the back edge of their
You're in your
court.
side,
or
That's
something.
right,
so
yeah,
they're all
yeah.
kind of lined
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
And then the dude at the end is kabaddi. It's great, man. You should check it out. It's super good.
yeah, it's really
Because we used to play a game when we were kids at school.
Yeah.
There was one game and then there was a different game. So the free range version of this was called brandings.
okay.
So you'd have a tennis ball and
Stones in the center?
no, like
Okay.
basically we'd be in the playground and if you've got the ball, you've got to throw it as hard as you can and it's got to hit me.
Right.
Right?
Okay, yeah,
and then if it hit me, that
right,
it's
right.
branding, right? Like
right,
it'd brand you like a steer,
Good,
like
right,
you'd have a
right.
red welt on your hand. But
Right.
if I caught it,
Right.
then you'd have to freeze and I get a free shot at you. So it was a horrible game, violent. And then there was like a called, I don't know why it was called Butt. Like
Butt.
it was called Branding's Butt,
Okay.
right? I don't know if people played this in other,
No,
maybe, I'm sure they played it in other schools.
Yeah.
So there's a wall, right? So we'd start off like maybe there's 5 people, maybe there's 20 people, sometimes there was 40 people. And there's a tennis ball and you throw it against the wall.
Got it.
Right? And the ball bounces back. If someone caught it on the full, then I would have to go and stand against the wall. Right? If I threw it at, if I wasn't against the wall and was back in the main area, if you threw it against the wall and it bounced on the ground and then someone caught it, you're not against the wall.
Got it.
But if they fumbled it, they're against the wall.
Against the wall. Got it.
Right?
Yes.
And then when you're against the wall, if someone like threw it and it hit you and then the ball hit the ground, you're out.
Then you're out. Got it.
But if you caught it, then you're back off the
Back
wall.
off the wall. Got
sort
it.
of thing.
Nice.
And then the chain thing would be like, sometimes there'd be only like, there could be 10 people against the wall and the last 2 people. If you like threw it and people sort of made the chain and someone and the person on the end of the chain caught it, then everyone comes off the
Wow,
wall
okay.
and you go back on. So it sort of sounds
So
a
kind
little
of-
bit like that.
It
sort of
is
thing.
that chain and that ability to yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't even know that.
No, I don't
you
expect
live and learn,
anyone
right?
should or would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we get that. We start that, a new league.
A new league
in
out here.
Singapore.
Yeah.
Branding's
think
Bar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought the cricket movie was really, really good,
Yeah,
and it reminded me of. It was just nostalgic for me, I guess, especially like the West Indies team, the Indian team. And yeah, they showed some Australian players, but not so much. But it was like it was a crazy. I don't know. It was just really nice.
It is a good, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they did the West Indies team really well, right? Because that was that one pivotal match I think, which never got telecast, right? Because BBC had a strike that day. So the semi-finals or something when Kapil Dev scored 175 and no one has that on film because
is that
yeah,
right?
BBC never shot that because they had the exclusive rights and they were on strike that day. So
Oh,
that
I
one,
missed that part because I was
Yeah,
eating
yeah.
while I watched
right,
it. Maybe
yeah,
I
yeah,
was.
yeah. But there's
I
that,
didn't
yeah.
realise
So
that.
that's that one innings which we all heard on radio. So we were like, oh no, we're going to lose this match. And then this guy comes in and does this 175 or whatever, which was miraculous. And the team wins.
It was the highest score in the world at that time, right?
I think
For
it was
one-day
a-
cricket.
I don't know if the highest, but yeah, it was pretty big at that point. I don't know if it was the highest or not because you had the likes of Vivian Richards and
Right.
Clive Lloyd, but it was a huge score. And that
Yeah.
was a winning score for the team.
Wow.
And we all heard that on radio. So, whereas here they actually enacted that a little bit. I
Yeah,
think,
because
right?
everyone
Yeah.
was crowded around the radio
that's
and
right,
people
yeah.
wanted, what's the
Yeah,
score?
what's the score, right?
And I thought it was nice, like, there was the bit where up on the border with
Yep.
Pakistan.
So we will not shell you.
yeah. Today,
Today,
we,
yep,
we,
today
we won't
we'll-
throw bombs
we
at
won't,
you.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
I think
kinda
that
cool.
was probably when the two countries actually got together to, because there was a win against, a Western country, right? To some extent,
Right.
yeah.
Ah.
But
So that really did happen, though.
I'm sure it did. I think all of this has been based on actual anecdotes. And,
Yeah.
it was a big moment, I think, generally for cricket in the region, right? So,
Yeah. Ah,
look,
that's really
even this,
cool.
the concept of Pakistan and India, right? It came with independence, right? Somebody had to draw a line, and there were political aspirations on two sides, and one new Muslim state got created. But
Hey,
at
so,
the fundamental
Pakistan
level,
was part of India, or
so look, like I said, there's never something called India, right? It was loosely called Hindustan, but it was made of. So Pakistan was made of these states called Punjab and Sindh, and and the culture and the people are very, very similar, right? So there were Hindus and Muslims living in these states even then. But typically, I think post World War II, right, when Britain started exiting their Commonwealth countries, right, a lot of lines were drawn. So if you look at the history of the world and you point to that period of time, you'll see that those lines and that rush to kind of create these independent countries, if I may use the word, led to a lot of bloodshed, right? Because the very concept of Pakistan was to create an Islamic state, believing that, under India there would not be a secular country, right?
Right.
But I think, that's what happened, right? But at the people level, right, there's a lot of culture there. People look similar. You can't tell one part from the other. How would you, right? Unless you speak the language. And so, and even today, right, there are families that got separated in that period of time. There are families who are in India, there are families who are in Pakistan. They've never met each other for decades.
A bit like the Berlin Wall.
Like the Berlin Wall, right? It is that, right? So you have that. You have food as a common culture. But I think this concept of anything that puts religion up front, right? And I'm not going back to history of why Pakistan was created, etc. But anytime there, that polarizes people. And we've seen that time and time again, right? So I think that's been the big one. And I think there's still a lot of trade between the two countries. There's a lot of friendships between the two countries. And of course, there's the politics, right? And historically,
but what's the disharmony between the two countries? Is it more a political thing and like who owns what land on a border?
It's the border. It's Kashmir, which is contentious.
Yeah.
That line of control.
But otherwise, you guys are cool.
I think at the look, there's a need to have have an enemy, right? It's great for politics. It's great for winning votes. It's great for saying I went and bashed that guy, and
Right.
And I think the two countries were fundamentally different, right? For example, in India, the military establishment comes under the political establishment, whereas in Pakistan, the military actually controls the government, right? They can, right? So there is that. I think the setups are kind of different, right? So you've had more stability on our side of the border, whereas I think on the other side they've been, governments have collapsed and the army has stepped in multiple times. But the other day, I don't know whether this is factual or not, but when the separation occurred, you had a very large army. So there was the British army then got divided, the regiments, and got divided into Indian army and the Pakistan army. But for a relatively small country, you had a very large army. And I think there was aspirations there to remain relevant, etc. So there's been a lot of warmongering and
the puffing,
chest puffing. Yes, that becomes part of that, right? So I think that's created a lot of. I think there's been periods of lack of stability, right? And when you have no stability, you don't have growth. You don't have growth, you have more problems. And I think they've had that. We've been luckier. We've had a period of relative stability. We've had changes in government. We've had different governments come in, but the succession has always been there, right? There's never been a military dictatorship in India from the time of we've grown independent. So we have a democratic process. We run elections every 5 years. There is a succession. Governments have changed, policies have endured. So I think that stability is, key for the region, right?
Are the elections in India quite fairly run and like democratic in the true sense, or is there some corruption? Look, every country has corruption.
I'm sure, but I think if you look at the way the Indian ballot is cast and how quickly the results get captured and put together, they brought in these electronic polling machines about 20 years ago. So there was this election commissioner, a person called T.N. Seshan, who kind of revolutionized the way elections would be run. He's a really strong administrator. I met this person. I used to teach at a management school while working, right, on the weekends. So he was a chief guest and I heard his story. But today in India, I think when you run the national elections, right, you get results in 24 hours, unheard of, right?
Right.
That's all happening because of this huge, these electronic voting machines that were put out, and the data just comes together and centrally gets compiled. Look, there'll always be some corruption in any election, right? Somebody's gone intimidation, right? You just don't let the guy vote, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, but I think on the whole, it's a very, very peaceful process.
Okay. As far as other countries of such a mass.
At this mass, I think unheard of. Yeah. And I think these are kind of the stories that never kind of make it out of the country, right? Because you think of it, it's such a positive story that they put this governance process in.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any mainstream media. It's not a great story to tell, right?
And that stability of government that's what has helped, along with like a massive population, that's what has helped like Indian industry and technology, because there's a lot of technology coming out of India. And
I think stability is an important part of it. Education is an important part of it, right? So there's a lot of emphasis.
It's a good
education.
education system, right?
It's a good education. So one can argue that it's not very practical, but at least you go through a basic education, right? Which helps you. It opens doors for you. I think that helps. And I think now there's this whole new spirit of entrepreneurs that have come out of India again, right? So there's a lot of technology innovation now happening in India.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. And I think it's solving problems that may be unique to India as well, right? So they are such a big country, so you have so many opportunities to solve various problems using technology. And I think that's what we are seeing, right? So, yeah.
Because obviously there's companies like Tata, which is just
massive and
huge.
Incredible,
like,
yeah.
It's funny that they own the most British of motoring companies, Jaguar and Land Rover, is sort of now owned by the
Tata
the
group,
colonized.
Yep.
Do you know
I know,
what I mean?
at one level, yeah, you can.
It's
look at
kind of
that.
like winning it back.
And
the
Tetley
Queen drives a Land Rover.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
You don't own Land Rover anymore.
But Tetley as a tea brand, right? That was again now owned by the Tatas.
Oh, Tata owns Tetley.
Tata owns Tetley, yeah. Wow. And I don't know if this is true again. They say the word Tetley, right, comes from the. I don't know, this could be folklore, so we have to fact check.
Making up again.
Yeah, could be made up. Yeah, it could. And I've read this, so I don't know how much of this is made up or not. But it comes from the word Titli, which means butterfly. So the butterfly tea brand is Tetley. Tetley became the anglicized version of the word butterfly.
Okay.
So
maybe it was a caterpillar under British ownership and under Indian ownership.
No, it was
into a
Tetley
butterfly.
already. I
Okay.
think the Tatas acquired them because I think for whatever reason they're big into tea plantations as a company, tea and coffee plantations.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what else does Tata own then?
Everything
that
from
we'd kind of
look from salt, right? The largest producer of table salt in India.
yeah.
All the way to advanced technology, so advanced materials,
Satellite technologies.
satellite. I guess components that go into that technology,
Right.
composite materials that are used in aircrafts, in ammunition, in vests, things like that.
Just everything.
To software, so I think software, hospitality. Let's look at the more visible ones: software, hospitality, retail. They're one of the largest organized retailers in the country today. To steel.
Right.
We also make steel was a very good tagline.
I
that
knew
they
them
had,
as
yeah.
a steel.
Yep.
A
So
steel
the
manufacturer.
steel manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
To watches, to jewelry, to
Really.
yeah, it's become a very big group. But I think what makes them unique is the sense of what we today call corporate social responsibility or giving back to the community. The Tatas have been doing this. It's been their way of doing business, right? They've always gone in and developed the community. So, for example, Jamshedpur is an entire township where the Tatas have their steel plants, but it's an entire township in its way.
Right.
And they've created education, infrastructure, roads, things like that. Ratan Tata even today is the kind of care and concern he has for people within the Tata group, I think is quite unique. Right?
So it's a privately owned company.
It is
still.
at the holding company is run by trust. So the Tatas hold all these companies through the Tata Trust. And a lot of the Tata Trust money goes back into philanthropic work. So Ratan Tata never makes it into the list of the richest billionaires in the world. He lives very simply still.
Really?
But they're doing all of this work behind the scenes to.
Wow.
Yeah.
How simply does he live?
He drives himself. He's got 2 dogs. He has 1 executive assistant, and that's pretty much.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
good. I saw Elon Musk doesn't have a house or something, right?
Yeah, I believe so. That I don't know, but
Yeah.
I haven't followed him that closely. I mean, I have yes and no, but I don't know much about his personal life. Yeah.
No, I neither
Yeah,
do I. But
yeah.
I heard something that he doesn't actually have a house. I think people were kind of commenting on like you're trying to help this or do that, but you got all these possessions, so he just like got rid of it or something like that. I don't know. He's maybe affected by what other people think. But I did watch the documentary of him recently, like where the going
space
up to
one.
space.
That is
it's
incredible.
quite interesting, right?
Yeah, and you think he's been at it for so many years, which I didn't know, right? Right from the time he exited PayPal, he's been interested in rocketeering
Yeah, like
was
as you see some
fantastic.
pictures where he's very young.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
and you're
correct.
thinking, fair play to
Fair
have
play,
this
yeah, yeah.
ambition, but also vision that like getting to space is actually.
And he's staked his fortune on it multiple times, right? He's been on the brink of disaster and he's still managed to. That's admirable, right?
It
No
is.
question about that.
Yeah, it must have been pretty fucking stressful at points where, like, you know, like,
I think so, yeah.
you know, like it,
Yeah.
and just the whole drama of it,
Yeah.
like, you know, 10,
Nine,
9,
yeah, I would like-
it's a countdown to like success or
Yeah,
bankruptcy.
bankruptcy. Yeah,
Yeah.
No, that was
Just make
incredible.
sure you're into the.
Oh, sorry, that was
no.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah,
Yeah, because there was one shot. I was like, he can't be. He doesn't even look 30 in one of them. And yeah.
No, that's why I think they traced it back, right, all the time to his interest in space happened just after he exited PayPal. I didn't know that till I watched the documentary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's just I always see Tata as like one of those like companies like. Once you realize, oh, they own that and that and that and that, it's quite amazing. But
I think there's a heritage to them, and there's been a lot of work they've done to develop the country. The story of Air India, right? It was owned by the Tatas. It's now come back into the Tata fold. So it was, J.R.D. Tata created, Air India. It started with one Tiger Moth plane, I think, that he flew from Karachi all the way to Bombay and carried
he flew
post.
himself?
He flew himself, yeah. And that was the origin, I think, of what became Air India. Then I think when India gained independence, and as we took on this agenda of trying to have certain sectors under the government, Air India got nationalized. So it went from being privately held to a national carrier. And then 30 or 40 years, 50 years later, I think it's back with the Tatas.
right.
So they acquired the rights they acquired Air India, lock, stock and barrel.
Who was
recently.
that guy? He was in Formula One,
Oh, Vijay Mallya.
and he was,
Yes.
was a bit of a scammer or something. wasn't
Yeah.
he? Like-
So that's an interesting story also, right? Because he was this. So the brand is Kingfisher, right? The beer, right? So Vijay Mallya's father was a liquor baron, right? So from Bangalore, had multiple distilleries, and then he passed away quite young. And I think Vijay Mallya took the helm of the UB group at that point in time, and he felt. India had at that point, remember, you couldn't advertise alcohol, right? So you could not advert. So we have this concept called surrogate advertising, right? So you created Kingfisher water, and you could advertise water or soda, but it was the Kingfisher brand, right?
Okay.
And so he made Kingfisher a lifestyle, right? And Kingfisher as a beer did extremely well. All the liquor brands did really well. It's a cash-rich business, and he was the brand for all purposes,
Well,
right?
he's like out there,
That's
public
right.
figure,
Yes.
bit flamboyant, or
I
living
think-
like this lifestyle.
I think it was Live Life King Size or something like that, right?
Right.
That was his, and he portrayed that lifestyle, right?
Right.
And he was always into cars, right? I think from the time he was young, he would, India near Bangalore, there is a racetrack, and he was very avid on, and did extremely well there. So he's always liked fast cars, and he's liked to live life really well. And then there's this whole story about, everything's going well for him till he gets into the airline business. And what started off initially as a budget concept, this became this premier airline, which, changed the way Indians flew, right?
And that
Because
was Kingfisher.
that was Kingfisher Airlines.
right.
And that was, even more branding, right? He said, look, I'm building a brand, and this is the best way to put it up front. Actually, at one level, you get that. And I think there were a lot of missteps in that journey that eventually led to mounting debts and, money being borrowed from from banks. And look, whether he's a scammer or whether, unless you know the books of accounts,
You don't know.
you never know, right? But the fact is, the airline did crash. Crew
Financially.
did not. Financially, it crashed,
Yeah,
and
it
didn't do well. It
didn't
no.
physically
No,
crash.
no. What I meant, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah. No, financially, it crashed. It did
Right.
really badly. The crews and the staff never got paid.
Right.
So it created a lot of resentment, right? And you think that when times are bad, you'd keep a low profile, but that wasn't him either, right?
Right.
He threw another big bash, and it's making, you're making the news, and you're doing these lavish things, and you're getting, I think it was Lionel Richie or someone else for your birthday bash, and people are saying,
Meanwhile, someone's not getting
paid, right? So you can imagine that doesn't not good PR at all, right? I don't think he ever realized what he was doing at that point in time. Right now, when somebody's down, it's easy to bash him up, right? So, look, he's in London. His position is, the business went bad, right? I'm not personally liable. I didn't take any money, etc.
Right.
Now, until you'd really do a forensic type of analysis of what happened, I would not know. But he's in London at this point in time.
Okay. Still living.
Lifestyle. Now I think you don't hear much about his lifestyle, right? But he had to sell his liquor business. I think that would have been a blow. He actually sold his entire liquor business to Diageo.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I think he said he's willing to pay back all of these debts as well, but
willing to
pay back these debts. But
I'm willing to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. But so it's an interesting story. It's really a brand that did very, very well. It brought pub culture into India, which never existed.
Right.
So you could get draft beer for the first time, and so yeah.
So then I have to ask,
please,
and this, I ask this of in an inquisitive way.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Because a lot of people would have this, associate this type of activity with India, is there's a lot of scamming that happens. You get these phone calls and stuff like that.
Yes, that's become
why? And you hear it in out of Nigeria as well. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Which one thing I thought was so cool was there was this one guy in Nigeria, and he managed to sell to a bank in Brazil an airport that didn't exist.
Right.
To me,
that's
you can do that.
You can do that.
You're
a
fucking smart dude, right?
It's
It's so amazing. We have this. I can't remember. Have you heard of?
No,
this?
I haven't heard of this one. But this would be.
This is amazing.
I haven't heard of this one. That's pretty awesome.
Nigerian scammer. He's not a scammer. He's an entrepreneur. Sells airport. He's even got his own Wikipedia. Emmanuel Nwede.
Okay.
A Nigerian advanced fee fraud artist. At least they called him an artist. Former director of the Union Bank of Nigeria. Okay. So he held a decent...
some credibility behind him. Yeah.
He's known for defrauding Nelson Sakaguchi, a director of Brazil's Banco Noroeste, based in Sao Paulo, of 242 million. Right. 191 of that was in cash, and the remainder in the form of outstanding interest. He did this over the course of 3 years. He basically sold him an airport that didn't exist. which is just brilliant, right?
I've got to read this now. This is going to be my.
I'll send you this after. I mean, it's brilliant. Spanish Banco Santander was involved. All sorts of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I don't say it in necessarily a negative sense. I have admiration for this gentleman.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff coming out of India.
There's a lot of stuff coming out, good and bad. Look, again, remember the digital divide I told you? A lot of young people, if you don't give them meaningful jobs,
they'll.
Guess what?
It's like you can give a young kid some paint, and he can paint a beautiful painting, or he can do a graffiti.
Right.
Same sort of thing, right?
Same kind of thing, right? So I think so. Look, it needs one person who knows how to do it, and then you have a whole bunch of people which will follow you and get it done, right? Which leads to the volume, which is why there's so much of it, right?
Yeah.
So
because there's an element of cleverness to it, right?
There's an element of cleverness to it. They're also a lot of easy targets, right? Elderly people, very easy to call them on one day saying, I'm calling you from this bank.
Yeah.
By the way, here is a problem. I need to help you. Can you give me your PIN? I'll reset it for you. The guy gives out his PIN. Now you got his mobile number. You got his PIN.
It's horrible. Like,
It's horrible, and you can go in,
really
right?
fucking up people's lives.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So you got at one level, I think that's a small, it's crime, but it's petty crime. It'll never get caught because nobody has the ability to catch it, right?
So
Think
they're
of
just
it,
kind of
right?
like
Yeah.
smart enough and audacious enough to like hack a system and get the infrastructure in place to
I think
have the reach.
It's phishing at the simplest level, right? Because if you look at the basics of anything, right? Email address, password, two-factor authentication, and you can speak people into a story and get that, especially if someone is not smart about it, right?
I also feel it's like a two-pronged thing, right? Because, and it's all down to technology, right? One, technology has obviously allowed that to take place.
Like it's available to them.
But the second part, I think, which is somewhat instrumental, is that by that use of technology, it creates distance.
It creates distance,
and
yes.
with distance,
You don't care, right?
it dilutes the moral.
You're right.
consequence,
The confluence, yeah. I think that's a great point.
If-
That
if-
is a fantastic point.
If you're
actually, yeah.
literally going
Yeah.
into like the lady down the road,
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
house, and taking the money out of her
Yes.
savings.
Yeah. You see the person, you know the person is in the society. You're right. The distance makes it. I just went in bragging rights, right?
You don't see them.
You don't see them.
It's almost a non-entity.
It's a non-entity, yeah.
Yeah, there's not a face to the crime.
Yeah.
No, there's not. So there is that type of
It's true.
crime, and that's technology enabled. And then there is much larger crimes, right? Which you've taken loans from banks and then you've misused the funds,
Selling airports that don't exist.
selling airports that don't exist, doing other things with that. That's another kind of a crime, right?
Yeah.
Again, that tends to get not punished so easily. But as of now, I think, at least from an Indian context, there is almost this. Vijay Mallya is like right on the list of people. So there's several offenders that the government has identified and saying, look, we really need to make to teach people that this is not the way, right?
Yeah.
Now, in all of that, what's right and what's wrong is very difficult to ascertain, right, as a reader. But there is crime. I mean, there is, it's there.
Yeah.
And it's different kinds of crime, right? Like there's states in India where they're from these small towns where people have just made this their business, right? Because they figured the know-how.
I saw something on YouTube where like, there's all like offices set up.
Yep.
People
Yep.
come to work. It's
Yep.
their job. They go
Yep.
through a data list. Like, and it's highly organized.
It's very
and-
organized. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's downright scary when you think of that, and that's where you're now living in a world where your information is your biggest asset, and you've got to
Right.
protect it, right?
Yeah. Biggest asset and also
Your biggest
Weak-
liability,
weakest link.
weakest link as well.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to learn to protect. But yeah, it's there. But I think, yeah. And you have, access to technology. You have a bunch of smart people. You need one leader, and then you can get the followers, right? Because for them, it's an SOP. You do this, you do this, you do this. They don't know the science behind it. They don't know the.
Yeah.
You need just that one guy to teach it. And then, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just
Yep.
incentivize with
it's
cash.
incentivize it with cash. Yeah. Not nice, because the biggest thing I have, and I have my parents being targeted all the time. I've actually told my father, please do not pick up the phone.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing to tell someone who's at 90 wants to pick up the phone, hoping it's a friend or somebody who wants to speak to him, and saying, if you don't recognize them, please don't pick up the phone up, right? And they are.
Yeah. It's all over the world. Like I see like news in Australia of it. I get calls all the time, sort of thing.
I don't know how many calls I've had through the pandemic saying we're calling you from the Ministry of Health, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then the minute you hear that, you just switch it off because you look at that number and you know it's an internet call.
Yeah. I mean, when my phone rings, I kind of don't answer my phone when it rings, like unless I know the number.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one point I was getting like calls like every day, like, and it was more like when it first started. So like I'd pick it up, hello, and then they'd be like, oh, I just want to talk to you about such and such. And I'd be like, no, sorry. And at first, like I thought it was, I thought it was like, people telemarketing sort of thing. So it was like, thanks, but no, not really. And then after a while, I was like, nah. But they keep ringing and ringing.
Yeah.
So like I had to work out like I need to waste your time for you to stop wasting my time. So then like I'd talk to them a fair bit, or I'd like pretend that I didn't know English, but it was very, very broken English, and they'd be like, "Oh,
you're a patient man. I have just
well, I thought I need to at least have some sort of fun with it, and,
Right.
and then like I'd be mucking around with them, but they don't realise, and I'm sort of dragging them along a bit, and it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, if I give you that, then you're going to give me that. Oh, that's cool. Or I'd like sort of talk to them, like in broken English, and after a while, I think they just there was a cross against my name, like it's just
Right.
waste of time.
Waste of
Better
time,
off to
yeah.
ring someone else. So I
Right,
don't get
right.
so many now. Yeah.
I think my younger daughter did that to someone who called her up, and she's got a phone because of she goes for classes and things like that. I just told her, please just don't do that ever again. because
Don't play with
Don't
fire.
play with fire. It's not worth it. So yeah,
There's
I
a
had to-
guy online, and he exposes them.
I've seen that. I've seen a couple of that. Like he says,
he's,
I've got my
he's in
camera.
India.
Yeah,
he's in
yeah.
India, and he kind of
Yeah.
like does spy cams
He's
of
spy
the
cams
people.
with them, and he's saying, "Look, I'm actually watching you as you're speaking to me." And
Yeah.
I've seen that. Yeah.
right. So that's like a example of people using the resources, smart people using the resources for the bad thing.
For bad things.
There's also a lot of Indian people, smart Indian people using resources for good things.
Good
Like
things, yeah.
I see, like especially in this country, and I believe in other countries, there's a lot of Indian CEOs at really high levels, like financial institutions and stuff like that. Like, what do you think it is? It's putting Indian people in a position for such high flying success.
Look, I think it goes back to education, and then when you don't have very much, you want to build a better future, right?
You fight harder for it.
You fight harder for it. I think it's that, right? We've all come. If you look at Sundar Pichai at say Google, or you take Piyush Goyal who runs DBS, or you take Indra Nui who ran Pepsi for a while, right? You take all of these people. Everyone's come from middle class homes where this hard work ethic is driven into you. Education was the way out, right? That if you taught yourself stuff, you got educated, you work really hard, then there's a chance for you to get the breaks you were looking for, right? So I think it's that underneath all of these stories, I think there is that particular commonality, if I may call it, that has made it happen, right? So it's not I think it's an outcome of that. Right?
But like before, you were saying like the education was like I think you said not so practical sort of thing. Like so, like I mean, education is a part of it, but is there like say something in the national psyche or the determination of like of Indian people to succeed, or you know what I mean?
I think it's determination for sure, right? Look, when I first came to Singapore, a friend of mine very honestly told me, he said, look, when you're from India, and if let's say you're running a race which is 100 meters, you guys start off 100 meters behind the start line. And at one point I could have taken offense, and I thought, fair point, right? Because you grow with a lot of constraints. You've grown up with, like many of us have grown up, and it was a poorer country than it is today, right? When I travel back to India, there's an affluence that I've never seen before in our country, right?
Yeah.
But when you've come from that, you come from, hey, look, I have to really rely on myself to build my future.
Yeah.
Then I think
it's in your hand. You're responsible.
It's our
for
responsibility. We are not, we can't blame anybody. It's our responsibility. Then I think you work towards that. Right? That's the objective you work towards.
Yeah.
I think that's there, right?
Yeah.
I think that is the driver. That's the intrinsic motivator, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's because you see more and more like people in like really high positions. There's and then I think like countries are more open to having Indian people come over and have work passes and like say for example like Australia, they're the way their immigration used to work, and I don't know now, is like they pretty much only accept people that they needed in terms of trade or profession.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And that wasn't always like at like
correct.
I don't know, professions that are considered the upper echelon, like
Right.
it's not like if you're a doctor you can come on over. If they had enough doctors but they needed I don't know,
a carpenter or a plumber or a lorry driver or something like that. Right?
Cool.
You can come
carpenters,
in, right?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll take carpenters, sort of thing. So was that their discretion, and it was to their benefit to a
Right,
certain extent.
right.
But now more and more is like especially in tech, right?
Yeah.
Like in programming, like
Yep.
Indian people are excelling in these roles and getting to the top.
Right.
Yeah.
No, so I think it's the opportunity. It was if you don't have a lot of resource, then you leverage what you can, and I think that was the story of the Indian IT sector, right? It started off with a couple of companies. TCS starters were, I think, the pioneers of the software movement in India. Then the next big iconic story is Infosys, which kind of caught public eye because it was a group of people that were working together that created this, big, really successful company called Infosys. All of them had very, very similar backgrounds, well educated, all came from middle class families, and that, look, we really want to create a successful company, and we'll try and bring the best of culture, the best of values. We'll be a value driven company because we are entrepreneurs. We are starting, we are first generation entrepreneurs, right? And I think those are the kinds of stories, and that led to the whole, the software revolution, if I may use the word. And I think that's been the mainstay, because if you see all the other development and the other entrepreneurship that's really made it big, is because technology helps you scale, right? If I'm running a small distribution business, I can't scale up that quickly because it's a physically demanding business, right? It needs cash, it needs capital. But I think with software and services and now increasingly the ability of Indian engineers to create products, right? But there's so many startups. For example, I know of a startup called Pixel out of Bangalore. And these are young kids out of college, right? And they've created a satellite company. It blows my brain.
Sorry.
A company that's launching satellites.
They came out of college and started satellites.
A satellite company.
How do you even do that?
Exactly, but it's interest. They they had a good teacher. I'm sure. I have no idea how these guys did that, but
they're called Pixel.
Pixel, yeah, out of Bangalore, incredible. And they've got, I think, their first, satellites have been launched as well. So it's not just some rubbish. And you think about that, and you think, that is
fair play, right?
Fair
you
play,
came
right?
out of college.
Yeah,
just gonna make some satellites.
And another group of guys I know, they set up a company called Grey Orange Robotics. Again, they were barely out of college when they set up the company. These robotic systems for warehousing. And they've grown. I think from the time I first knew them, they're now probably 2,000 people or 3,000 people. Seriously, yeah. And they had, they built something. I think there's another company Amazon acquired called Kiva. They built a Kiva-like type robotic system, and what it does is it, in these high speed supply chains, you kind of people picking up and taking things for packing, right? These little butler robots do that. That's right. That's what they do. And what they did was they made these robots self-guiding, so they put like a grid system on the floor, and these robots would read those lines, and they know exactly where to go. So you'd actually program and say, go to X, Y.
There's a language in the lines.
That's right, yeah. And you go to this location and you drop this up and you pick up something. And I think, just think about that. But, kids out of college, they were final year students. They did robotics in their college work. They went and worked for robotic companies, and they come back and create a company like this. So that imagination, I think, that freedom to imagine, that's changed quite a bit. And I think the sheer availability of information, the internet's allowed for people to dream, because information has now come to you, right? From being isolated from information when you're not part of a developed country. Now there's information at your fingertips, literally, and it's there.
I think also because in business there was a lot of there was a period of time where India was seen as like offshoring.
Yes.
Right. So cheaper labor.
That's right.
But good, pretty good quality,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And a lot of that happened with the call centers at first and stuff like that. In my industry, advertising is like maybe there'd be larger big offices in India, and you could sort of send work to them and have
correct.
Things done quickly.
Correct.
But it was generally not like the creative work. It was more like sausage factory as such.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Cranking things out.
Like cookie cutter, right? Get this done.
Cookie cutter.
Here's a template, produce it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it seems to have gone from where they're providing a service that other people ask for to
creating products and innovation,
creativity themselves and building it for themselves. I wonder, is it like kind of perfect storm in a way, although storm is a negative connotation, of that cheaper labor, but that good education and that I guess confidence to just start something and creative minds that sort of are building these.
So I think I think the software industry took off in, let's say, the 90s, right? So 1990 to 2000, 2000 to 2010. This is our 30th year in technology. Let's if you trace it back, right? So what you've had people who grew up in that industry and are probably retiring in the industry, who stayed with these companies. But the next generation and the generation after that kind of learned how to build stuff and said, look, I can do this for myself. So they created other service companies. So that became the next kind of wave. And now there's this another generation which says, listen, I don't want to build stuff. I'll build stuff that I think solves problems. And I think that's the evolution, right? So it didn't happen overnight. It was these steps that have happened, right?
Yeah.
And through this process, you've got access to learning the latest technologies, things like that. But it's also, so people start learning technology in college. And then some folks have a natural aptitude. Then they just say, listen, I'm going to create my own business and I'll create a company and I'll do this and I'll do that. What's also changed is it's become cool. It's become okay to be an entrepreneur, right?
Right.
I remember when I was in college and I was printing T-shirts to earn some money, everybody kind of looked down and said, that's kind of cheap and tacky. And
really?
Yeah.
What were you putting on the T-shirts? Was that the issue?
No, it was just really, really cool. We learned to screen print. So I went, and a friend of mine was a graphic designer. So the three of us, I used to teach kids. I used to give tuition, so I had cash with me.
Yeah,
which was cool. So we put a little screen printing table together, and we'd buy T-shirts on the wholesale, and we'd just print just cool graphics. And I remember I had a friend of mine who was a Palestinian back in my hometown. He'd come to study there, and I think he created one for Free Palestine. It sold with all his friends. It wasn't a political statement. It was like, oh, you want that? Done. Here you go. We can do that for you, right? It was really that. But I remember everybody frowned, and I very proudly went and announced, I made some 3,000 rupees, which was quite substantial then.
Yeah.
And everybody gave me this dirty look, saying, that's kind of so uncool, right?
Because what, they thought they were above it?
They were above it. You should only work for a company. This business stuff is,
Really,
but that's changed now, right? So society has changed. It's become more accepting of entrepreneurs.
So
today.
Success was being part of a company.
And
if that company was like a big company that
big
everyone
company,
knew, like
that's
Google,
right. Yeah.
then
it was
that's
even
how
cooler.
You made it.
That's
even
right,
if you were like, I don't know, making tea in Google.
That's right. That was still you work for Google, right?
That was better than making your own money.
than your own money and things like that. So that's changed now. I think there's this acceptance that entrepreneurship is interesting. It's creating value. It's creating jobs, and
there's also must be
change in this big social construct change, right? From there,
I think so.
I find that very surprising, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think the social economic makeup of India has given rise to natural entrepreneurship in all sorts of people. Like when I spent my time in India, people are smart. They're very smart. In all stations.
Like on the street to in the boardroom, right?
Exactly.
So on the street could mean I'm going to help you, or I'm going to take something out of your pocket. But I always...
the brain is working. No, but I came from a service background. My father in the army, not from a business family. How can you see? So there's also where you come from, right? There's a framing. There's a framing to that, right? But if I came from a business family or a trading family, they'd say, this is great. Yeah. Can you make it faster, cheaper, make more money on it? But it's that, right?
What's the Indian chap that you met in LA in the hotel? Was it in LA? And he blagged his way into the job.
That was I met a guy in a hotel basically, and this guy must have been close to 60, I'm assuming, and he was like a high level consultant for hotels, restaurants. So he was an F&B consultant, and he basically, when he was young, I can't remember how, but he heard of someone who'd gone overseas. So he was from India. He heard someone gone overseas. They had managed to somehow get a job in a restaurant. So he would just write to all these restaurants. He would never hear anything, because this is probably 45 years ago or something, right? Yeah. So one restaurant got back from Amsterdam.
Right.
And they basically, I think they were just trying to be kind, you know, thinking, oh, this young man was taking an interest. So they just wrote back and said, look, you know, something along the lines of, we would love to give you a job, but we can't. Something like that. So he somehow cobbled enough cash together, got on this plane to Amsterdam, and just played dumb and just said, oh, I'm ready, I'm here to start work. Knowing full well.
Now you can.
Right.
Because I'm here.
I'm here, yeah.
And so, long story short, I mean, they felt bad because he'd flown all this way, and he was completely playing on pulling their heartstrings, and they gave him this job, and he managed to get a visa, and the rest is history. But I mean,
And now he's an
Wow.
F&B consultant. And
yeah, in America,
Yeah.
California, so it's just many years
No,
later.
no, but I'm sure there are a lot of these stories. I mean, there's also the time when, you know, to earn money you had to go west, right? Because there wasn't the jobs weren't there, the jobs didn't pay well enough, so a ticket to a developed country meant, you know, a better future, right? So there was that whole generation of people that were very, let's go out of the country. Now I think there is the reverse, that there's enough of opportunity, let's do something within the country.
Yeah, you can
I think
be
that's
self-sustaining.
changed. You can be
right?
self-sustaining.
India
yeah.
can
You
be more than enough for you.
Be more than enough for you, because it's such a big market now, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think that's also changed. But I think late 50s, early 60s, 70s, 80s, even from the time I went out of college,
Yeah,
I think a lot of
to
people
get
just went out.
Yeah. Well, imagine if like just there's power in numbers, right? Imagine they can bring that the lower class up into the middle class and give them more education. Like imagine in India would just
No, I think that's
become
happening.
the world power, right?
So they're saying, again, look, they're saying by 2050, China would be the world's largest economy, followed by India, followed by the US, followed by Japan. Again, I think these are probably
Japan's third.
third.
now?
No, I think it's the third now.
Yeah.
So I think they're saying that'll be the new GDP numbers. 2050 is what they're saying.
Right.
Look, these are
not-
well
not
into
that
the
far
future.
away.
It's not that far away. So it's well into the future. But I think that's just evolution, right? That's what's happening. It's
Very interesting. Yeah. And then, so going back to like you know, like your military family, and the way that you're sort of moving around, like you must have saw some like really cool things and natural wonders as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you?
Lots.
Were you guys like in nature a lot? Like, because the other thing that I see or think, I personally think about India is like the wildlife. You know, like there's like tigers running around. Like, is India the only place where lions and tigers?
Both lions and
coexist?
tigers, they coexist.
Yeah.
I think they coexist. Not sure about that, but I know we have the Bengal tiger. I think we have lions, but not sure if they coexist in the same forest. That I don't know.
There's one national park.
Kaziranga, I think.
There's one national park where lions, tigers, elephant, and the rhinoceros are still.
That would be, I think it's Kaziranga in the north. Rhinos are in the northeast, so that's
Right.
Kaziranga. I think that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like did you get to see much of that wildlife?
I saw a lot
like,
of
growing
wildlife
up?
for sure. We saw, but you know, I don't think I've seen a tiger or a lion. I haven't been that lucky.
No.
But bison, or you know, wild buffalo, wild boar.
Oh, like is it
Yeah.
more like that Asian water buffalo?
More the Asian, but they're huge. Like they're massive and they have nasty tempers, so you don't want to mess around with them.
Okay.
Wild boar, so lots of wild boar.
Yeah.
Deer, and you know that tons of rabbits. You know, smaller
You
animals
always
like
hear
that.
of leopards cruising into villages.
I
and
haven't
causing
seen.
problems.
Honestly, I haven't seen a leopard. I've seen tons of snakes in my life.
Yeah.
But not leopards. Not really any of the large. Let me call them the predators, right? Haven't.
They're
thank God,
rarer,
also,
right?
they're rarer,
Yeah.
right? And I haven't seen those. But you know, almost everything else: elephants, bison. You know, all of the other. You know, the more herbivorous type of creatures. I think I've seen pretty much all of them.
Well, I remember. Is it Vakala? Vakala is in the south. It's a beach sort of area. I think.
Near Goa is no.
No, it's south of Goa.
So-
And I think I was getting hunted by a predator, but they were street dogs. Like, because I was walking somewhere like late at night and like.
No, you don't want to. Yeah,
I was
they can
shitting
be.
myself. Like
Yeah.
I had to like they were following me. Like,
Yeah.
and I had to. I had to show them who's boss, right? Like,
yeah.
I had to like just pick up a stick and like
Yeah,
run at them and like whacking it on the ground and
but look,
literally
from
trying to hit them.
But from their point of view, you were trespassing their streets, right?
Oh, yeah,
You're like,
yeah,
who's
yeah.
this person? What's he doing at this time of the
Yeah,
night? But
I mean,
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah,
right. But at this, I kind of
I think with the street dogs, you have to be very worried if it's got rabies or something, right? That's the big worry. Otherwise, they would normally not, unless they're really hungry. But
dogs, it's Thailand as well. Like you will see these dogs like pretty placid, pretty chilled out.
Yeah,
Like you're going from wherever you're staying to the beach, you walk past them or whatever. They're kind of sort of doing
do your own
this.
thing, mate.
Yeah, but then at night they change.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like the pack comes together, sort of thing, and it's time to
not mess around with them.
Yeah, whether they're protecting or hunting, I don't know. But I felt kind of pretty hunted at that point. I remember being in Cambodia as well, like, and there was like a lot of dogs in this particular street. And there was this like one big sort of black dog down the end of the road, and I don't know why. Like I sort of seen him, and it was like he kind of like his nose like lifted to the air, like he'd caught the scent of something, and he sort of like ended up sort of going down to the street and just like looking at me and just like started walking towards me, and just like fuck.
You don't want to.
Street dogs in Asia can be a bit.
No, they can be intimidating, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they're bigger ones, and actually any dog can, if they sense. And if they sense fear, they know they've got you, right?
For
they
sure.
sense fear very quickly.
Yeah. In London, there's like a lot of naughty little kids, and they're walking around with pit bulls and stuff like that. Right. And like you'll be like on the footpath, and just like the dogs, some of those kids can sense fear too.
That's right.
So
yes.
if you like cross the road, they're onto that. Do you know what I mean? And you might get a bit of shit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like. Yeah, you got to stay on the side of the footpath, and then it's like you can't trust some dogs, right? Like, so it's kind of like it's like you've got to walk at the dog,
right,
and make the dog move,
right.
and it'll walk around you. But
Correct.
if you don't, like, it'll sort of
they're
doing this
that's
at
right.
you.
Yeah.
But if you walk at it,
then they will
you.
move around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless he's the one with the very, very bad attitude, then you could be in trouble. But
that's what I always worry, because some of my friends had some of these sort of naughty dogs when I was young. Is like, yes, there's the owner and the pack and all that type of thing. Right. But there's also, in dogs, I'm quite sure, just like people, some of them are psycho.
That's right. I mean? They're absolutely right. Yeah.
No, you don't know
you're right. You don't want to mess around with them, right? Yeah. No, we saw a lot of wild animals and also a lot of nature and a lot of harsh nature, right? So, for example, in Imphal, which is one of our bases, we had a river that was flooding, right? And our base camp was next to the river. So I remember being up because, if you had a flood, you had to run. But also
it comes down that quick?
Yeah. So the heaviest monsoons are in the northeast, right?
Of course, the monsoons.
Right, so monsoons, right? So if the river breaches the bank, then you've got water that will flood, pretty much the whole area.
Is it still parts in some cities where like the streets are flooded, or is that finished now?
You can still get that, I think. So you've had flooding in Bombay, for example, in heavy monsoons, like we've had in Singapore. You have a flash flood.
Yeah.
So you've had any I think coastal city where you have high tide and heavy rain.
It's
you
the
will have
ocean that comes.
It's the ocean. You've got the seawater coming back into the drainage system and heavy rain. So your natural drainage of water goes away. That gets blocked. So you can have that. So you've had that in Chennai. You've had that in Bombay. Any coastal town will have that. But then in the northeast, you have a lot of flooding, right? And the rivers and the Brahmaputra can flood. It's a mighty, mighty river, so that can breach the river bank and flood.
Mm-hmm.
And in Imphal, we had the river. I think it was the Imphal River. We had floods there, so you had to actually put sandbags, right? Sandbags to kind of bolster the height of the
levee,
the levee, right? So to just prevent water from coming in.
Oh.
So it's just seeing those are interesting experiences again because
and they would all flow into the Ganges, right?
So they're different rivers, right? So so basically all
not tributaries.
No, they're not. These are actual rivers in their own. They are river systems in their own. Yeah.
And Carl, you went. Is it what was the river place you were telling me about? And people go there.
The Ganges, yeah.
But there was one particular part or one town where it's like it's a holy place, and if you die there, it's
Yeah, I can't remember the name, but there's a town where people go near the Ganges, and they, because of the whole karmic cycle and
Yep.
What do you call it, reincarnation, they believe that if you die in this place, you don't come back, so your spirit doesn't come back to Earth. So some of the people choose to live there and die there.
And die there. So
Some of them live there their entire lives.
Entire lives.
Other people are sick,
Yeah.
and it's become such a busy place that I wouldn't call it tourism, but you have to get on like a list to stay in.
To stay in,
yeah.
Right.
I don't know which town that, but I've seen that. I haven't visited. I've seen a documentary on this where there'll be a lady who, let's say, her husband's passed away, probably decides that she now wants to go, and they come in. It's also a community, but they also feel that if we die here, we'll be at peace. So yeah.
It's because like India is also like extremely spiritual place.
It's
right?
a very spiritual place.
Yeah. It feels like that. Like I don't know if it's the gods that people are following or I don't know what it is, or the mindset, but it's like there's less of a fear of death.
I think
Perhaps.
it's a part of life, right? I think we accept it as part of life, and you experience it, you see it. Somebody passes away. It's very visible, I would say, right? So in a way, it becomes something you're
Well, in
used
the
to.
West, people kind of like, dig a hole, put it in the ground, sort of thing. But like there, you have the funeral pyre. And
Yeah, the pyre. I think there's a lot of consolation there. Rituals that mark the death of someone. There's remembrance. So in a way, it's that person is celebrated, I guess, through prayer. But it is that, right? I think in the West, what's happened is it's boiled down to a ceremony and a burial, and it kind of that's where it ends, and maybe some anniversary. But I think the grief is never let out, right? So there's several rituals by which one accepts somebody has passed away. I guess with time now, a lot of this will go away, right? Because at one point, the whole thing is who's got the time to do all of this, but still,
right.
a lot of, fairly, I wouldn't say families which have not let go of these, you probably have all of these rituals to mark the passing away of someone. Yeah.
But would you argue that, I suppose because there is a higher number of religious people in India, and other countries too, like this religious belief, because they believe in an afterlife, this is a process rather than finality. So it's kind of like, whereas in England, our religion is science, almost these days, right?
Right.
So, science is black and white, it's empirical, you're dead, that's it.
Right.
So there's...
It's been great.
It's been great. So I think by that rationale, there's a fear because it is this finality.
That's the end of it.
Yeah, that's the end.
Yeah. So I wonder if that plays a part.
I think it does. I think there's this belief of this
coming
cycle
back,
of life,
right?
right? Yeah. Either it's coming back, or this, this is it's a continuum, right? So I think that's probably why there isn't this finality to it. And, there is stuff like karma and reincarnation and everything else. But I think there's also this acceptance that there's... I don't know how to explain it, honestly. We've never looked at death as this final chapter, right? We know there's an end, and then you hope there's a beginning, but... I haven't
It's
analyzed
like
it that
rebirth,
much.
right?
Yeah.
In a way, like if you believe in
that,
reincarnation, it's
Yeah.
rebirth
Yeah.
as well.
But even in
But
the
I
realms
don't-
of science, there is no end, right?
There is no end. That's
there's
right.
no
Because
change.
you're just going into all that you have. All that's really happening is, you're going back to Mother Nature, right? You kind of that energy changes.
Yeah,
It's constant.
It just changes
Energy is
state.
constant, changes state. So at that level, I think there's a lot of that in our scriptures, right? That talks about energy and Shakti and who you are is beyond
in
the
Hindu
physical.
scriptures.
Yeah, in Hindu, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is beyond the physical being, right? So I think when you think of it that way, then the soul transcends, right? So,
And there's elements of that then also like in the Ayurvedic medicines and like the chakras and,
so again, with Ayurveda, I think it's all about understanding the body and then figuring out ways to heal it naturally, figuring out ways to align the body, align the centers of energy. Then it's about diet. And rest. I think it kind of and a peaceful mind, right? So I think it ties all of those elements.
It's very
in.
holistic, right?
It is
And what the
holistic.
West would call holistic therapies.
Therapies, yeah,
or something
it
like
is
that.
that,
But
yeah.
like in India, that's medicine. You know
That
what I
is, and it's pretty good medicine. Now, look, I think what the West has done with allopathy, right, is it's faster acting, right? So there's a specific symptom, you can cure the symptom. I think Ayurveda looks more at
Cure the symptom.
the symptom, not the root cause, right?
Exactly.
But but if you already have a symptom that's deteriorating badly, then maybe you don't have time for the Ayurvedic cure, because the body's already reached a stage of disrepair, right?
Yes.
Then I think nothing helps, right?
Yeah.
But I think Ayurveda is based more around those principles, and I think there's this belief that diet, exercise, and energy management generally can help the body repair itself, right?
I mean, I would say that's fact, right?
Yeah,
Like
it is
more than belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you've got things like that are modern day age, which is like stuff like cancer, etc., right? Where you can't really treat it. Arguably, or there's not enough data to.
I know
look at
a
today.
guy who refused the chemo.
Right.
Yeah. Like, so he was someone who knew a lot about plants, and he was from New Zealand. He was from a Maori family, and he was hanging around the wrong sort of crowd, like, and he was he was doing some illegal drugs and things like that. There was a lot of alcohol, and he found out he had cancer, or the excuse me, the doctor in New Zealand told him he had cancer, and he's like, the doctor said, we don't know what type it is, but we know that you have it. And he took this the wrong way, and he's like, well, if you don't know what type, then how do you even know I have it, sort of thing.
Right,
so he carries on with his lifestyle,
right.
a little bit destructive lifestyle, and then he starts to get to know someone, a Thai person, and that person was teaching Thai massage, and he starts to sort of learn some Thai massage and starts to really gel with this person, and he realizes that he's in a destructive environment. Do you know what I mean? Like, the people he's hanging around are wrong. This is bad for his health. So he removes himself from it, and he goes to Australia, and then he's there for a little while, and then he starts to research about plants and stuff like that. So he already has an understanding of plants, but he's learning more about diet, and then people are sort of saying that you a plant-based diet, and getting off red meat, and you can cure your own cancer in some cases. So he ends up he knew somebody who had like a property or something, like a remote place, and he drives off into the bush and just walks into the bush, and he comes across a lemon tree, which is in like an unusual area. And so previous to that, he fasted, right? He didn't eat for like a week or something like that. Just took water, and he kind of knew plants that you could eat and not, and he'd touch their leaves and really like feel them, and then if he felt like he needed it, then he would eat it.
Yeah.
And then, after a while, he came across this lemon tree, which that doesn't grow native in Australia, and he thought that was weird. So he just started eating a lot of lemons, right? And then he comes back into like suburbia and stuff like this. And in Australia, you sometimes see this is like, and I think my grandmother did it as well. She had a lemon tree, and you see it in a lot of like Greek families and Italian families. They'll have the citrus, and there'll be too many, and they'll put them on a plate,
right,
on the front, out the front of your house,
right,
and you put a box so people can take the lemons and put
the
money in the
nice.
box.
Okay, yeah.
And he sort of like start to see this, so he's got lemons,
Right,
like they keep popping up. So he's just like eating a lot of lemons, and then he's not very well to do, and then so the guy that was teaching him the Thai massage said, look, you can get really good healthcare in Thailand. You can get like really, really good tests. Maybe you should go there and do the tests again. So he saves up, and that's where I met him. My friend said, I happened to be in Thailand at the same time. My friend was like, can you go see this guy? So okay. We're in the same town, so like we just sort of like met up, and he'd basically been there for a week, and the first 2 days, someone stole his phone. He got scammed with something else. He bought a suit because he thought he was going to die, right? And if he was going to die, he was going to wear a nice suit. And he'd been in his hotel room for like 5 days and hadn't left because he'd had all these bad experiences. And sort of, so we went out, just walked down the street, and we were chatting, and he was telling me, yeah, I've got to go back for the suit fitting. It's like, where is it? He's like, oh yeah, the guy that showed me, he drive me to it or whatever. You know, the guy was driving all around here and there just to get to there.
Get right.
It's like, oh, we could walk there together.
Right.
And then he realizes, fuck, I got scammed again. I was like, you know, like maybe the person that took the phone, maybe they needed it more.
They needed it more than
whatever. You, yeah. And because Thailand wasn't vibing with him, sort of thing. And you know, we chatted, and he, you know, we went to a temple. He wasn't religious, and then he started to see the beauty of the place and the beauty of the people. And then like 2 days later, he had to go to the hospital because he was getting his results, right? And I didn't go with him, but I was meeting him after, which I don't even know this guy so well. He seems nice enough, but it's like, shit, I'm going to meet him after he gets his results. Like,
correct.
What am I going to say?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
How'd it go?
Yeah. You can't. Yeah,
Will you be with us in November? So like we sort of go back, and the he said he got his test, and then he sat there for like 3 hours, and he watched doctors come back into this room, and he just look at people's faces, and they were either happy or devastated because the doctors were saying, hey, you're cured, or you're not, and you're going to die. Like, and he didn't know what he was going to get back. So then the results from his tests had been sent to that hospital, and the doctor basically came out and said, look, like, here's the results. What I definitely know is you had cancer, right? And here's the results that show that, and this is why. He goes, here's your results today. Now, not only do you not have cancer now, I can't even tell you had it.
Wow.
And he said, like, whatever you've done, like, you need to tell people about it, sort of thing.
Right.
And yeah, so yeah, like there are holistic ways that, and maybe it's a bit of luck, but there's a lot of documentaries online. Like you see, like there's one called Hungry for Change, where people have talked about fasting and plant-based diets and curing cancer and stuff like that.
So fasting and these techniques are part of, most Indian, so typically it's,
I mean,
you
Gandhi famously fasted
for a cause, right?
Yeah.
But I think even today, families, they would fast on a particular day of the week, right? It's just ingrained into your way of life.
Oh, just on one day?
Just on one day, yeah. And they just do it regularly throughout their life, right? So I think then you have the positive benefit of fasting because you're giving your body a break for.
Oh yeah, if it's not
hours,
digesting,
correct.
It can concentrate
on healing other things, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Me and Kyle were lucky enough. We sort of had the opportunity to, you know what Taipusam is?
Taipusam, yes, I've
yeah,
where. Yeah, did you go and see the festival?
Like this guy like allowed us to sort of go with him. We'd never met him before, and because we were kind of thinking, oh, we want to go away, but basically we want to quit our jobs and go traveling. We realised we're too old and too poor. But what was like a travel type of experience we could do here, and then that week. Taipusam was on, so it's like, oh, we could go and film it. Do you know what I mean? You can go to the temple and take some pictures or whatever. And then just before it, I rang a friend, and I said, do you know anyone who's doing it? And he said, oh, ring this guy. And I rang this guy, I never met him, and he said, ring this guy. And then 5 guys later, someone on the end of the phone said, yeah, okay, you can come with me. You can meet at my house at midnight, and we can just do the whole thing. And it was like one of the coolest things I'd ever done here, or ever done, really. And we kind of realized that, it's such an opportunity. We can't just like take a few pics. Like we sort of need to make it like a little doco.
I believe so. Yeah.
So like I'm the idiot in it, talking in it, but basically, he invited us in our home. Into his home and met his family, and he talked about it and talked about like the different gods, and this was like he mainly prayed to Parvati, I think, but yeah, he was talking about like to prepare for it for a month. He's like fasting for a month and sleeping on the floor, all for this big day where he basically pierces himself with a lot of things, puts on a big. It's called a kavadi. That's when you said kabaddi.
Yeah, kabaddi, that's right.
Kabaddi.
Yeah, okay.
And walked like.
It's 12 kilometers.
4 k's or something, 4 kilometers or something.
Okay, maybe long. Okay.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Yeah. So fasting allows you to do amazing things as well.
That's right.
Not just healing. Well, we've been going for over 2.5 hours, I think.
Okay, I've lost track of time.
Yeah. Should we call it a
yes,
wrap?
Yes, we should call it a wrap. Yep.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on.
Likewise.
It's nice to talk to you, Tarun.
Likewise, Paul.
I learned a lot about India.
No, and I've learned a lot from your adventures and travels and how to pick up a cool studio. Like, wow, well done, guys.